It's time for Planet Green.
We've launched.
We've completely launched. We've started the show, and it is Planet Green Trees. We're about to embark 2 hours of medical marijuana and marijuana reform in Michigan.
Attention, ladies and gentlemen, the Planet Green Trees show is underway with your host, attorney Michael Komorn.
We have launched.
Welcome, everybody. Planet Green Trees officially beginning. Episode number 540. Today's date is November the 18th, 2021. We're calling it Stuck in the Moment. We're excited. We got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. I'm your host, Michael Komorn. Of course, you're listening to Planet
That was not the title that was emailed to me earlier today.
Something weirder than that.
I'm just going to say.
You're listening to Michigan's number one show about cannabis, legal issues, licensing, regulation, compliance. A lot of regulation compliance talk tonight. Medical marijuana topics, current events, and other legal matters. And I'm Michael Komorn of Komorn Law PLC, and we are got a lot of good topics to talk about tonight. Let me first start by introducing our esteemed panel of community entertainment. We'll start with, of course, the technical directors, the Bunker Boys. We got Tommy, Justin, and Dangerous Dan somewhere lingering around here.
He's gone from dirty to dangerous.
So dirty.
Immediately next to him, batting fourth,
D.
playing shortstop, founder of Michigan Parents for Compassion. Please welcome Jim Powers.
Good evening, Michael. Good evening, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to an action-packed show. We've got some good topics to talk about tonight. Maybe a little back and forth. We'll see. I think it'll be good. So
We could have called the show and said the scandals continue or something like that.
yeah.
All right, next to Jim Powers, we have retired police officer and the rover here at Komorn Law, all things Komorn Law, and of course the outstanding library of songs from the 70s. Please welcome Steve Miller. Steve Miller.
Thank you. Good to be here and looking forward to the show.
All right, we are.
We got Jamie here.
Well, instead of going to the Zoom and waiting to
I
introduce
know
him,
it.
we're fortunate enough to have join us tonight in the studio, returning to Planet Green Trees.
He's back.
One responsible for everything,
Yeah.
sporting the
And he's wearing his sweater.
White Panther John Sinclair swag. Little John Sinclair swag, always good showing up in that. The one and only Jamie Lowell.
White Panthers. By the way, there will be a John Sinclair 50th anniversary celebration of the rally that happened, like with John Lennon and Yoko Ono and all that kind of shit, and Chrysler. And it's going to be in Detroit at the Ralston Building.
Where's that?
December 10th. It's like just south of the State Fairgrounds, a little bit, right
So
off,
east side.
right near
like
Woodward,
mid-side.
like a block away from
Mid-side.
Woodward, just south of like 8 Mile, man, pretty much.
Like by the old state fairgrounds.
Yeah, where the Amazon shit's going in right now, just south of there.
Is there tickets for that?
Yeah, there's going to be something going on for that. I'm kind of helping out. It's being done in quick fashion, but it could be an opportunity to raise some money for the John Sinclair Foundation and to recognize this great
Icon.
50 years of
Iconic.
of this.
Of this battle.
Yeah,
And
Sounds fun.
I should mention, James, it's good that we're recognizing John Sinclair. He's an icon, both for his commitment to cannabis reform and also for taking up Richard Nixon and the wiretap, unconstitutional wiretaps, for warrantless wiretaps.
A lot of people don't understand his role in that story.
They don't. But I was going to say we're going to try to coordinate the Canada Jam donation to the foundation with that December 10th date.
right on.
There was some talk of Canada Jam's proceeds are going to be, we're doing it, and we're going to present
We're doing it.
big
Absolutely.
cardboard, big
Big
cardboard
check.
thing that's got writing on it.
Huge.
Yeah, and unless I don't get another chance to say it, work a lot with Sons and Daughters United and Glenn, Great Lakes Expungement Network, and there's kind of doing a little holiday fundraising drive. So instead of getting gifts for your kids or other wastes of money,
That's right.
consider
Get
giving
people-
to these charitable organizations, and they will get money for kids, or they'll give money in to families and gifts for kids and stuff like that. It's a really cool program.
All right, in the Zoom room, we have all the way from Florida, returning podcaster and cannabis consumer herself. Please welcome Amanda Joslin.
Thank you, Michael. Happy to be here. Looking forward to all of the great guests that we have and also some of the exciting topics,
A lot
things
of
that have been
guests. Yes.
causing a ripple in
There
the
is.
flow.
And let's get to that right now. We've got a number of great topics to talk to, and our guests are already in the Zoom. I don't want to keep them waiting. I see Robar of Helping Friendly Salve, and Rob is returning from 2 weeks ago where we was talking about Delta 8 and Delta 10 and the impact it's had with the amendments to the recreational law, essentially declaring it to be contraband per se or illicit and taking it off the shelves. Rob is going to be discussing that. Last week we had a lot of talk about that with Cass from the Botanical Company and all those other subsidiaries.
Carbodex.
But at the same time, we're very excited because one of the huge issues and one of our main topics we're going to talk about, which is the Marijuana Regulatory Agency issues recall of select Michigan marijuana products. And we're going to get right into it right now because we have in our Zoom room waiting to get on here is Lev Spivak-Birndorf, PhD, and one of the co-founders of PSI Labs, and also Benjamin Rosman, Juris Doctorate, I think that means lawyer, and also the co-founder of PSI Labs, joining us tonight to talk about the ongoing scandals of lab testing and the laboratories in Michigan. So first, Rob, thank you for being here, and of course, Lev and Ben, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
And I want to start with the lab guys, of course. First of all, tell us a little bit about PSI Labs. You're one of the how many labs are there in Michigan? Go ahead and explain that and how long you guys have been doing it for, and a little bit about yourselves, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, as of right now, I think there's 17 licensed labs, maybe 18. They're not all operational though. We got our start back in 2016. Before that, I was working for law offices of Michael A. Komorn, and I got my start in medical marijuana criminal defense. That's how I sort of came up, got a feel for the industry, and understood, what was happening just in that space, really. In terms of lab testing and that sort of thing, I'm a patient myself, as is Lev. And I remember when dispensaries were first coming online and products had labels on them. That became more of a thing coming around 2014, 15. And, a few times I just got way overly stoned. Something said CBD only, and I got uncomfortably high. Introspectively, nightmarishly high when I didn't mean to be. And so, that just kind of got us thinking, my friend Lev here is a chemist, and we started talking about the possibility of opening up a lab. And he was finishing a postdoc at IU, and the timing was right. And so we opened in May 2016, and we ended up being the first lab that had both licenses in both medical and adult use. Opened up in Ann Arbor. We have a location in California as well that we just closed an acquisition on in July.
That's excellent. I just have to ask you one question. Are you admitting that you were doing all this while you were working for Komorn Law? Just admit it, yes or no. Just kidding.
No, but I was very much interested in the space.
Just kidding. All right, so
this guy's my legal mentor. That's absolutely the truth.
All right, so the industry has taken off, as we know. There's reports monthly into the amount of sales that take place, and the market share of what's being sold all has to be tested, or has primarily been tested. At least that's the current regiment.
Yeah, to keep people safe.
To keep people safe. So
New bulletin just came out.
all right, so let's get right into it. Obviously, this announcement is that the Marijuana Regulatory Agency's recall. It was just one particular laboratory. Their name, of course, how do you pronounce it, Jamie? Viridis Laboratories. And they're referred to as being the COP laboratory. Why is that? Why are they referred to the COP laboratories? Does anyone want to take a stab at that? What do we know about that?
I think you would know better than anyone.
I know. I just was quizzing everybody.
You definitely know, because we've talked about it.
Gregory Mashad, who was the former director of the Michigan State Police Forensic Science Division, and happened to be at the helm of the boat, driving the boat, when in fact they decided that they were going to start reporting non-plant material marijuana as synthetic THC. So we know about him, and his reputation speaks for himself. I do remember him revealing something interesting, that he spoke at a CAP seminar in Detroit, which is the criminal advocacy program, and I attended that, and he was discussing lab and marijuana and blah, 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 and made a statement which was that 40% of the lab's budget at that time was being spent on testing marijuana, 40%. And then he followed it up by saying, and if anyone was wondering why we weren't getting to the rape kits, that's the reason why hopefully legalization will help that. That was back in 2016. Well, we know that it may be fair to say the lab's spending less time testing marijuana for criminal cases, but I guess it's fair to say that Michaud is testing a lot of marijuana nonetheless still, and probably doing very well from it. So the impact of this event today is got a lot of layers to it, and I want to try to peel some of it back. Let's start with the impact and the amount of cannabis that was effectuated by this announcement. First of all, let me just get to the what happened today. The agency, the MRA, said it has identified inaccurate and unreliable results of all marijuana products tested by Verity's laboratories in Verity's North over a 3-month period, except for inhalable marijuana concentrate products such as vape carts, live resin, and distillate. First of all, that's a crazy paragraph to read, because they're telling you all of their products except this. You know, like it puts questions into, except this. But nevertheless, a 3-month period of time, they've identified, and we're not even sure what it is, right? We're not even sure. It's because inaccurate and unreliable. Inaccurate and unreliable. Is it unreliable in terms of the microbials that need to be tested, the metals that have to be tested for? Is it for increased THC? Let's turn to Lev. Lev, how did you read that paragraph? Lev from PSI Labs. What is your take on what the MRA has identified, as vague as they're being? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, being on the inside of the lab scene, you can make a few guesses as to what they're getting at, just based on the little bit of information, as vague as it is, that's given there. So they do identify, microbiology testing as being the issue here. Why you would see an exception then for solvent-based concentrates kind of makes sense, because that's the one type of product that is not required to go through the microbial screening in Michigan's guidelines. So I think that kind of clearly points to something in the micro testing panel, which includes a few different tests. So it would be what we call the enumeration tests, where you're looking for an amount of either specific type of bacteria or yeast and mold. There's limits in Michigan that you have to be under to be considered passing. Then there's another type of test we do that's more of a presence absence for really specific, potentially harmful pathogens. And they mention an illness that can be caused by one of these in the bulletin, which would be aspergillosis, caused by the aspergillus fungus. So that's another micro panel. So those clues kind of hint at this being, related to the microbiology testing. And as of now, though it does state that it's an ongoing investigation, those are the products that are in question because of something having to do with the testing.
Understood. Now, they do go on to say that the bulletin specifically states the product should be retested for microbials, compliance panels, and consumers with weakened immune systems or lung diseases. They are all at high risk for health-related incidents such as aspergillus, as you mentioned, which is an infection caused by mold. Now, we've dealt with, from the case side, the aspergillus as a, in situations where
aspergillosis.
Okay. Aspergillosis.
Yeah, that's the name of the disease that you get from it.
All right.
Aspergillus is
the name of the bacteria, right.
Yeah.
But I was just saying it was an excuse that was used. I remember Steve Miller testified in a case where the law enforcement had destroyed the evidence to it, the cannabis plants,
Based on that.
Well, they didn't want the aspergillus.
based on the concerns that aspergilli
Correct,
would be, in the air, and aspergillosis would be
How
a concern.
convenient.
And but they didn't have any basis for it. Like they said, someone read about it on the internet, kind of thing, and they had a lot of concern and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting it's not a real thing, but it comes from severely molding. I mean, it's spawned from mold, if I'm not mistaken, and degradation of the material. But
I was of the opinion they should have.
what's your opinion? Steve Miller did testify in that case as an expert and suggested that.
That they be prosecuted.
Yeah.
It's a good answer. I like that.
If you're going to take
For
the evidence,
destroying
you
evidence.
can. If you're going to take the evidence, at least store it. But all right, so back to the science side of it, though. Is this something to be concerned about? Like just the fact that they're mentioning the compromised immune systems, those people that have health or lung-related issues. Ben, what is your take on this? I know it may not be your area as a physician, but what are the concerns that people should have learning about? If their immune system's weakened and they've been buying cannabis that's being purported by the state to be properly tested, it's not.
I can't speak to really the health impacts. We're not medical doctors. We test and we'll tell you what's in these products, right? And we'll give you accurate scientific data. But I think that's really what the MRA was trying to get at here, is that the data that was put on these various packages was inaccurate, and that's problematic. Because if someone does have a weakened immune system, these action limits are set for a reason.
Right.
That might be set by, for public health reasons, by the various departments of public health. A lot of these rules are kind of copied and pasted across various state lines, we've found. And I think that's the case with aspergillus as well. But honestly, I don't know that much about aspergillosis, but I do know that MRA found the evidence compelling enough to take a really severe, harsh action. Like doing this recall, 3 months worth of products. We saw it's 30 pages of
Retailers.
of products all across the state. It's going to have a devastating impact on the industry. Say what you will about corporate cannabis. Some places might go out of business. Some folks that are, vertically integrated, they only stock their shelves with products that they grow, edibles that they make in-house. And if they're exclusively testing with Virtus, if they rely on this lab and they trust them and they don't really think that much about it, 3 months worth of those products that have been tested there are gone, pulled off the shelves. So
right, let's talk-
MRA.
I was going to say. Go ahead, Lev. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like Ben said, we're not medical doctors, so it is tough sometimes for us to weigh in on, whether this is the right limit or the right thing to test for. But we assume that MRA has done their due diligence on that as well. They have advisors in the Department of Health and Human Services and doctors who are weighing in on this. And in the most recent draft rule set that they put out, they mentioned that aspergillus is potentially going to become a test that if you fail, you can't remediate. So they obviously think it's extremely sort of dangerous or potentially dangerous. I think just based on some assumptions you can make from the way they're kind of attempting to approach it. So I think that's why they really maybe flagged that out, because they consider it potentially highly, dangerous.
For sure.
Yeah, I would also suggest, and I might be wrong, but in bold, it's sort of ominously noted, note an MRA investigation is still ongoing, which I think hints that there could be a further, more widespread recall that's oncoming. It might impact concentrates as well. It might go to other test types. I don't know what that means, but I don't know that we've seen something like this before. And to me, that did seem, it is bolded. It's right in the middle of there on the first page. And I think it's putting labs on notice, but I think it's also putting retailers, processors, growers on notice that this might not be over yet.
It's interesting because you guys are really, I think, you're being subtle about it, but I think it goes back to those that are aware of cannabis. It has not always been tested, right? It's not always been tested. The concerns health-wise, we don't, for years and years and years, there's no testing, and people say, obviously no one's ever died from it, and some molds never killed anybody. I think even the director of the MRA, or executive director, has been heard saying that, which begs the question why, about the lab testing and all. But we're not. That's not the question today. The question is, if you're going to have a lab and you're going to test and warrant the products that are being sold, and it comes with a stamp on it, and it's based on the principles of consumer protection and guaranteeing safety. Now, I also took your points to be that whatever the levels are, the cut and paste from other states are arguably arbitrary. Like the difference of some of the testing for medical and recreational is different for the microbials, and that. The logic behind that, who knows? But so we're stuck with that now. So that's a reality, and I realize it's part of the conversation that we're talking about. But we are talking about testing and how the state has mandated this, and it's part of this regulated program. It's we've heard for weeks and weeks and weeks the dangers of not testing, and here we have a recall of product. Yeah. That seems to suggest
3 months worth.
That entire philosophy is flawed. Now let's just talk about the impact here. One of the lawyers for these organizations said he's heard across various sources the amount of cannabis flower being recalled is about 64,000 pounds. To put that in perspective, in October, 24 pounds of flower were sold in Michigan. Thus, a 3-month period of time would be approximately $200 million worth of marijuana product.
It's quite a bit.
They interestingly interviewed Steve Linder, the lobbyist group, who's the mastermind of the destruction of the Caregivers and the introduction of 5301.
Is very important.
He said in an email statement that the recall will be disruptive to the business operations of some of our members as well as the industry as a whole. Maybe they're going to need some caregivers to help supply the market. You think that would come out of his mouth? But added, the license recalls are sometimes necessary function of the license market. Let's turn back to this issue. How could something like this take place? If you have the proper mechanisms in place, how is it that they can start reporting synthetic THC instead of marijuana when they know it's synthetic? Or let me say it another way. How can they start passing the testing that it's, that's passed the test for metals, contaminants, microbials, or whatever, and it still gets to the shelves level? Give us an idea of how something like this could actually take place.
It's very complicated, really, how this all works. There is quite a bit of, I'd say honor system built in with checkups. That's kind of how a lot of this stuff functions, right? So as a lab, you have to prove that your methods are valid. We have to do that with third-party accrediting bodies. So that's part of this ISO accreditation that every lab has to receive, right? So it's sort of like we went through that process of obtaining a driver's license. We were legal to get behind the wheel, but that doesn't mean that we're not speeding every day when we're driving to work or running a red light, And so then you have to have these periodic check-ins with the departments, with your accreditors, and they kind of look through your processes to see if things make sense. Are you following your own SOPs? But often that's what they're looking at. Is sort of, do you have SOPs? Do they work? Are you following them? They have limited capacity sometimes to dig a little deeper into the data. And as a result, their time periods can go on where things might be kind of off the rails, right? And it takes checking back in one of these moments of sort of digging a little deeper to actually uncover big issues that are going on. And ideally, in an accredited lab, you really get opportunities to improve these things and make the changes that are needed. If you get to a point where potentially you're being questioned on your methodology, it's likely you've sort of been asked about it already leading up to that point, in my experience anyway. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to, maybe not act with the level of integrity that you should or need to run an operation like that. And I think there's a lot of obvious motive in the industry, right, to do this, because you stand to make a lot more money as a lab by being friendly, if you will, to your clients and sort of giving them potency numbers that are very marketable, diminishing fails that would prevent them from getting to the shelf in the first place. So, I don't know what's going on in this case. This is only stuff that MRA knows about, but I know that industry-wide, it's sort of not a secret that lab shopping is a big problem, and sort of unlevels the playing field, right?
They have a certain similar rule in the court system, preventing like judge shopping. Like you can't pick a judge like that's supposed to be randomly assigned in situations. But that may not be a fair analogy. I would say this. What's most disturbing, I think, is that you have this concept of a seed to sale tracking, government oversight. Each of the licensed operators that are involved with the cannabis have cameras. They're supposed to keep them for 30, 45 days, store the data so, that's observing all things. So at any point in time, the MRA could stop in and do an inspection and see what's going on. That's one thing. And there's a lot of tools that are in the enforcement, office for them to take care of. They got a lot of people. They're well funded now. They're well staffed. They know where everybody is. They can call them. They can stop by and do inspections. By virtue of the license, there's no need for a warrant. And I think it's fair to say that the system, whatever rules they came up with, however they built it, whatever necessity they came up with as the standards, that they have similar oversight that exists within the seed to sale tracking. And it's not just police officers that are enforcement officers that are overseeing the numbers and data that the labs may collect, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ben, and you could correct me on this, that the overseers of this information and the overseers of the enforcement remains with the MRA. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
So I just want to draw the parallel to what I've always maintained is the problem with the forensic science divisions and their scandals is that they are, and we'll say that they are, the Michigan State Police. They get paid by the Michigan State Police. The budget is from the Michigan State Police that portions are cut off for the lab. The Michigan State Police have directors that are involved with the policy making of the lab. That's not supposed to happen. You have prosecutors that are part of the decision making of the lab. That's not supposed to happen. The lab has one client. It's the Michigan State Police. Too embedded. It's incestual and nothing good about it, and just gives a total air of bias or appearance of bias. Now, turning to the MRA and its oversight of this, it is not good optics for this to happen. Am I right? Is that fair to say, Ben?
Yeah, even forgetting the optics, I think it's just a really tough position to be in when the MRA, their interest is in supporting the industry, helping in the administration of all these different businesses, supporting them, trying to get the social equity program off the ground, really promoting business interests. So that's on the one hand, but then on the other hand, you're trying to regulate it and regulate science. And so if you have laboratories that are saying these business interests that you're promoting are doing things the wrong way, or, all hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of products that belong to these business interests that you're promoting need to be pulled off the shelves immediately. That's like one hand pulling the other. What are you supposed to do? It's just highly problematic. And so if you instead had a bifurcated system with MDARD regulating the labs, which that's totally within their purview, they're great with laboratory sciences, and then MRA doing the other licensees and promoting businesses and then regulating and doing that sort of thing, it might be a healthier system. And everyone just kind of stays in their own lane. But I think it's just too many cooks in the kitchen, and everyone's,
Well,
with one agency trying to fulfill all these different roles. It gets messy.
Well, I would say this. One of the things, and I think what you described, the challenge of the MRA, one of the things that I think is implicit in all this is that they provide confidence to the consumer, right? They want to be able to say, it's got a stamp on it, and you are assured that whatever you're paying for, instead of going to the caregiver or illicit market, whatever it may be, we're trying to draw you in here, and when coming in here, you'll have this confidence stuff. This announcement to me should, to the consumer says that the confidence level should not be there right now. And I'm suggesting this, that Lev, from a scientific standpoint, you want to have, in order to declare a laboratory within the scientifically accepted standards. And I know ISO is one of the thresholds of approval to be within that, the scientific approved standards. But science, for laboratories especially to really be effective in the scientific spirit of precision and accuracy and repetition of results over and over again, you need to have audits. You need to have surprise audits. You need to be able to prepare for the audits. You need third-party audits. You need to have tools in place for all these things to take place. So to disrupt the predictability of an audit, you got to be able to come in and draw from random and really test what's taking place. Now, do those tools exist currently with the MRA, and do they have the capability to do that, first of all? And secondly, if it's true, are they utilizing those protocols that are in place, or are they failing miserably because of their desire to maybe want no lab scandals?
Yeah, it's tough. So what you described, I'd say there's a bigger issue at hand in the cannabis industry in general, which is that we haven't done a good job of hanging that bullseye on the wall yet, right? So we know what's accurate and what's not. Some of us know that. We're building that data set, and we're involved with, for example, our lab works with the National Institutes of Standard and Technology, which is a federal government program. They make the standards you would use in a lab for other industries. So, for example, if you want to test water for a particular contaminant, metal, these guys have standards available that say, here's a water sample that's been certified by 150 labs to have this amount of the metal of interest plus or minus this amount. And you can therefore run that through your process and verify whether your method is valid and returning a real result. That is so undeveloped in the cannabis industry. It's getting there, and it's so great to be a part of that. With NIST, for example, we used to joke well, there's no NIST pot brownie I can get, to calibrate my instrument, but we really need that, and they're actually developing it. So right now, the most legitimate platforms for actually putting out what are real cannabis data on chemistry are places like Leafly. They have PhD data scientists who are actually writing papers in Nature, which is literally the best scientific journal in the world. If you're just a scientist of any type and you publish an article in there, you can make your career off of that, and that's where these guys have shown what are valid ranges for cannabis flower potencies. They've shown that labs are cheating, and you can see it through statistics, so it's starting to, awareness is being raised, but this sort of lack of standardization and ability to ground truth data leaves doors open for labs to kind of play games and make arguments that their data is legitimate when in fact put to the real test and kind of compared in an apples to apples way with another lab that's attempting to be accurate, you're going to find that that's not the case. Now, Michigan also lacks any kind of reference lab. So to answer your question there, no, they have basically zero capability to check up on anything. So they use us, and I don't mean us specifically, but us labs, in general, to audit each other a little bit, which obviously has some, potential risks involved in that. They can use more than one, start to build cases. They do run us through, for example, interlaboratory comparison events. Great idea in theory. The problem is, again, people can behave when they're being watched one day a year and then kind of go out there and do whatever they want if there isn't a more meaningful system of in-depth transparency and auditing. And that has been a frustration. I mean, our position is that transparency is key. And so the more they can share this data, there's really no reason to sort of obscure scientific data other than maybe hiding something, right? Like when we take these interlab comparisons, we do these types of tests with third-party agencies as well, and besides the MRA, with labs all around the country, right? And a cornerstone of these is that they send you a report saying, here's the group and here's you. Because as a lab, if you're doing your job, you want to know, are we an outlier? Is there something in my process that needs improvement here? And so it's we're working with limited tools, and it's getting better and better. But I think the only thing that's really going to bring that about is a really big conversation, a lot of transparency, and just as a whole industry, not just from the labs, not just from the growers, but the consumers. We have to kind of look inward and say, do we want to move into a world where it's all about illusion and puffery and just sort of walking around saying we're smoking 30% weed? Or do we want to know the truth? To me, that's more interesting. And I see a future where, cannabis takes on more of like an alcohol type role where, you might pay 10 times more for a bottle of wine that has a fifth of the alcohol content as some moonshine you can buy, but that's not what you're buying on, is kind of just potency alone and things like that. So I think right now, data on cannabis is exciting and used for marketing. And so there's a lot of room for abuse there. But what you hinted at, this lack of ground truthing and sort of trusted reference labs is hindering the entire industry across the board in the whole nation. So it's something that I hope will continue to improve.
You mentioned
we had a couple.
Go ahead, Amanda.
A couple of questions from the audience, from the viewers here. One of the viewers was asking, is the mold teased out when the flower is made into a distillate or some other type of concentrate? So is that why you would have the recall of having the flower products but not the concentrates? Is that
It's a good question.
Yeah, essentially the mold is killed during that process. So when you turn something into concentrate or distillate, it generally involves a beginning step that is soaking things in solvent, and that's a known method of sterilization and sanitation. So when the doctor will rub your skin with alcohol before they stick a needle into you, or that's just simply a way to kind of clean things up. So we know from tests as well on those downstream products that you really do an effective job at neutralizing the microbial threat.
so that would be the same then for RSO, I'm guessing?
Yes.
Another patient was asking that question as well.
Absolutely.
So whatever.
Oil in general reduces the risk a lot of some of the bad things that can be in there. You can often lower the heavy metal content by extraction. You can remove foreign matter if there's bugs that you were going to be smoking in there. So no, extraction is it's a useful process.
I mean, we really don't know unless we're predicting what the exact, what was the issue, right? In other words, how did they phrase it? They phrase it that it has identified inaccurate, unreliable results. We don't know what that is. We're assuming that it is microbial. It could be metals or other foreign things. And the explanation that is given here that why some of those products still remain on the shelves and passing testing is because of this processing that would eliminate that. So does that help us? Does that lead us to the idea that those things that would be removed in the process of an extraction of some kind would then be now? I mean, does it give us some insight that those were the things that were in the products that are the reason for the unidentified or poorly reported? Lev, do you think that there's any connection there as we just, with that?
Yeah, yeah. I think that totally tracks with the concept of it, because they're saying these didn't need a micro panel. And the reason they don't need the micro panel is because of that known, neutralization of any living microorganisms that could be harmful. So, yeah, I think they just, at this point, that's a strong clue that this is really all about questioning that microbiology data, which would apply to flower, edibles, and non-solvent concentrates. So things like rosin and bubble hash. And those do have no solvent kill step. And sometimes they have water even involved as like a physical mechanism in the process. And so that opens you up. Anytime you're soaking something in water, if you don't handle it correctly from there, you've, clearly increased your risk for microbial contamination.
I want to return to, you mentioned the bullseye, and I got to tell you that it rings bells in my ear because I had an expert in a case once, and we were discussing, science, and science is about hitting the bullseye. It's all about hitting the bullseye. So the expert told me this over and over and over again. I remember the case got adjourned like 20 times. I never understood anything he was saying. Yeah. Then one time, the last time, it like clicked with me. And it was something to the effect of like, Mike, you got to think of it like this. If you're there at the court there to put money on the sharpshooter, the sharpshooter takes his gun out and shoots at the bullseye and hits the bullseye the first time, are you going to put your money down now? Or are you going to wait to see where they shoot the second one to? Because the second one could be over there, and it's not the bullseye, and that's not the best. That's not the best sharpshooter, right? Or the best sight.
Yeah, you're talking about precision and accuracy, right. Related but not the same.
So with that being said, I was alarmed by that first statement that we still don't know where the fucking bullseye is. Like, there's no NHTSA standards, right? Like, because they're Schedule 1 shit, and they're still not putting up numbers through the science and baking into these known standards like they normally do. Like, I don't know, some of it's bullshit anyways, but it's usually the source by a lot of this stuff. And I know that all the forensic labs, they get there from NHTSA, the alcohol, where's Steve? The ampules that they test on the data master machine. They'll produce some of the, or at least some kind of license to purchase these other types of drugs that they can then get into the GCMS that run with the standards and whatnot.
So the crime labs just have a big cabinet full of
it's funded by federally licensed organizations or some kind of contract with them. And you're suggesting that in this space, Lev, they're still developing the general underlying standards or baselines to which this testing is to be compared. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's limited sort of reference materials, and so they'll be kind of non-ideal sometimes, and they won't be an exact replica because they can't send you distillate in the mail, and so right there you run into a problem with that. But in fact, there's not really a good substitute for cannabinoids that's not cannabinoids. So it absolutely is a problem and a challenge.
What do the crime labs use as their standard for marijuana?
Well, so okay, I gotta back it up a little. I mean, there's standards available, right, where someone can say to us, the way those standards usually work is it's about having a purified form of a compound in a measured quantity in something that we as a lab can manipulate. So typically that's about 1 milligram of THC. That's the DEA cutoff for what a lab that's not DEA licensed is allowed to possess, is 1 milligram in 1 milliliter of THC. So that's all I need to calibrate all my instruments and kind of say, hey, this is exactly where your thing is coming out. Now, where the layers of complexity start to build, right, is that these companies, they certify their stuff. They have a process, they're ISO accredited, but they also still make mistakes like every human out there. And we've seen stuff where we'll get a standard, use it, generate a calibration curve on one of our instruments that's used for potency. Then I'll shoot some THCA crystals because I want to know not just that, hey, my standard is looking straight. In other words, my precision is going to be good every time on this, but does the number that I'm going to get out of this even makes sense? And if I've run into times where we do that, and the THCA crystal that I know from previous tests on a good curve is, 98% THCA, suddenly it comes out at 120, right? Now, that sets off some alarm bells. I have to start digging through. All right, did my technician mix this curve badly? Let's start digging through standards. We found times where the standards maker had an error and then sent an email weeks later being like, oh, by the way, if you were using this THCA standard of this lot, it's off by 15%. Well, that's a huge amount in our world, right? And if you're putting out numbers like 103%, people obviously know nothing can be more than 100%. Some level of inaccuracy exists here. And yeah, it's things like that. So for me, there's a layer of due diligence required by a lab like ours to sort of ensure that you're accurate, and you have to get a little clever and figure out ways to do that aren't necessarily going to be clearly laid out for you with the perfect materials available to you to establish that. So it's something that we've, I think put a lot of time and effort into to convince ourselves that the data is of high quality, and then we're comfortable presenting that to our clients.
So Lev, what about stuff like the contaminants, pesticides?
Yeah, so
Is
those
that stuff pretty straightforward? For sure.
Yeah, that's better because the challenge more has to do with our matrix and the fact that there may be sort of complications introduced by the cannabis specific matrix. But you're going to run into that with those type of compounds, no matter what world you're in, whether it's environmental, food testing. Now, there may be more off the shelf supplies to help you get around those challenges in the other industries than there are in cannabis. But yes, there's a lot more, because of it not being a Schedule I controlled substance, these pesticides are much more freely exchanged between labs and establish those standards. So it's funny because the metals world is a great example of that, right? I'm a metals geochemist by training. That's what my PhD's in. So trace metals and geologic materials, ancient sea sediments, meteorites. And so that when they added this test to cannabis, it was a very natural transition for me. And, because of sort of the level of standardization that already exists for metals outside of the cannabis world, I've been able to establish protocols that where we got a more accurate answer than the blind testing lab that sent us a metal sample, because I had NIST federal certified standards to back my data up. And I called them and said, I'm pretty sure you guys are wrong about this copper, not me. And it, triggers an investigation. They look into it, and they ended up having to write to MRA, essentially saying, hey, remember when we told you PSI failed this one metal? We were wrong. We sent them a test where we didn't even really know what was going on. And so that's the level of, kind of how early in the game we are at this point, where sometimes the testers who test the testers aren't even accurate and need our help.
They need to be
sort
tested.
of
The testers that are testing the testers need to be tested.
Well, Michigan State Police did the right thing by just cutting that part out.
Yeah.
In the old days, didn't you find out that there was supposed to be like a third-party accountability kind of component to the Michigan State Police operation, and that it turned out that they were their own?
Well, you can trust them, Jamie.
There's no other oversight.
You can trust them.
It's kind of like when they had the data master scandal, and
they investigated it.
They had a third-party contract to go to the data master that was required to be inspected by the manufacturer every 180 days. It turned out there was multiple sets of data. They're all different and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So they breached the contract. Michigan State ended the contract, started investigating, criminally charged, and said that they would provide a report about it. It just doesn't sound.
Makes sense.
It was, the other example we used, somebody's heard this before, but remember that, there's many stories like this, but in Oakland County, there was this officer, Ferguson, that got fired for lying in an affidavit. He was looking in a car, the thing, and someone figured they reported it, and then the Oakland County prosecutor's position was, we're going to do an internal investigation to decide what cases Ferguson's testimony effectuated it. Yeah. We'll tell you, don't ask us, kind of thing. It just doesn't sound like the type of Lev, I want to ask something. It's nothing to do with cannabis or metal testing.
And then we got to take a break.
Okay, fine. And I'm just curious, in the field of testing, and I know it goes to the whole heart of the ideas of having standards, right? You got to have the baseline in order to evaluate this, especially on the machines that are being used, because it's imagery that's being created that's compared in the GCMS or whatever. But I do have any familiarity with how they get the samples for blood and drugs when they're testing blood for levels of controlled substances. I'm just curious if you know.
Oh, like how they prepare them for the instruments? Yeah, so I mean, it's funny. We're using the exact same equipment in a lot of cases as they are. That's where these, like you said, so these things are instruments, right? Then they're very much like an instrument. You have to tune them up. You have to play the right tune, to get to do what you want. So I can use the same equipment if I dial it the right way to look at a pesticide in cannabis oil as a police officer could use to investigate trace quantities of a drug in your blood after a crash. So they in those cases though, you're talking usually nanograms per mil, which is approximately what you'd call parts per billion. And so these are very, very low contents of drugs they're looking for in your blood. So you have a lot of matrix background to analyte ratio. Similar situation to what we're dealing with pesticides. We're kind of looking for that needle in the haystack. So there is sometimes more complex sample handling that needs to go into that. But as the technology develops, they're really moving things away from that to where these instruments are good enough to kind of just pull that needle right out of the haystack and be like, that's it. I mean, you can take these to court.
But they have to have within the machines the data that comes from the baselines and each.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You still need to calibrate them.
So what I'm saying, so I'm just throwing out there just as if you happen to know, I mean, I know the answer to it's just a bizarre, I just didn't know because I was curious to know. It strikes me as very strange from a lawyer's perspective, but that's not the first time that's been contrary to the science thing at times. But I'm just throwing out there's got to be a source of some kind to get the item that you need to create as the standard. So regarding blood, what do you know of the sources that these labs will get blood from, if you know? I'm just curious what you know.
I don't know about specifically blood and where they get that standard. We don't not working in kind of human health. We don't know as much about that. But for example, Cayman Chemical. So that's a company that's like literally across the street from our lab right now. They make a lot of the cannabinoid standards that we use. So it's professional labs that have like chemists who will synthesize these compounds in pure forms, and they have DEA licenses in the case of cannabis to do so. And so, they have a whole set process that they go through to link things to this unbroken chain that we use to calibrate. But yeah, there's complexities, obviously.
Well, I guess listen, we got to take a break. The question that I should have asked was, do you think it's okay if the standards for blood and controlled substance testing they source it from expired blood from hospitals and blood banks? That's the question, if you think that's okay when we come back. We're going to take a break and listen to Planet Green Trees, episode number 540. We're calling it Stuck in the Moment. We will be right back.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
When you're charged with a crime, you need a real attorney. And here's just a few reasons why. The police, the courts, the labs, the drug tests, probation, the judges, the jails, the prisons, and the entire system is just one big machine. They have one objective: take your freedom, take your possessions, take your money, take your children, control your life, and destroy your future. You only get one chance to hire the right attorney. One that will stay in your corner. One that will fight for your rights. One that will fight for your freedom. Choose an attorney that's experienced in fighting the justice machine. Attorney Michael Komorn. Knockout victories one case at a time. Komorn Law. Google it. komornlaw.com.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
This is for those two wonderful couples that have been out here the whole time. Thank you guys very much. You're wonderful. I look forward to seeing you all next year. We are the Fox and the Fiddle. Thank you, everybody. Well, I set out after 25 years of hanging out and drinking beers. Finding a life of my own out on the road. And the way we think life ought to be, all ain't the way now. As you can see, ours seems to be a lot less love to go around. Trying to get from where you are or to where you wanna be. Keep on believing, soon you'll be seeing everything you wanted. Plus how you live a dream. Fall right into your lap with some time since happened just like that. Never mind the things you're thinking. All you gotta do is, all you gotta do is believe. Well, I made a man now in Timbuktu, and he looked at me, told me the truth, so be thankful for this life that you've been given. Some times are tough and the chips are down. Now remember you can turn the whole thing around. So be thankful for this life that you live on. Try to get from where you are or to where you wanna be. Don't believe on it, soon you'll see it. Everything you wanted, that's how you live a dream. Fall right into your life with the times and sad just like that. Never mind things to think of me. All you gotta do is, all you gotta do is, all you gotta do is believe. Just like that, never mind the things you think of me. All you gotta do is, all you gotta do is, all you gotta do is believe. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa. good and kind to one another. Tell someone that you love them. Pick someone up when they're feeling down. Always look before you leave. Remember, most importantly, we love you. We're the Fox and the Fiddle. We'll see you next year. Miss Emily Joy. Oh, yeah. I'm Austin Scott. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Oh, yeah. We're doing it. Thanks, everybody.
An important and historical farm crop in American agriculture is returned after having been classified as a controlled substance and illegal. On December 20th, 2018, the President signed the Farm Bill, also known as the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018, into law. The signing of the act was great news for the hemp industry, which amended the definition of marijuana in the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Hemp is now defined as the plant, Cannabis sativa L, and any part of the plant, growing or not, with less than 0.3% THC concentration on a dry basis. The plant itself is no longer a controlled substance. Hemp is one of the most versatile plants on earth. From clothing, fiber, paper, building materials, hempcrete, biofuels, CBD, and medical uses, it has been a part of America's industry for over 200 years. Even the United States Constitution was drafted on hemp paper. The time is now. If you're thinking of getting in the farming or processing of hemp, contact our global experts, legal, and consultation teams to make sure that you're on the right road when you venture into the new hemp industrial revolution. Michigan Hemp Industries has been a leader and advocate for the return of the hemp industry, so come be a part of the new revolution in agriculture in Michigan.
Charged with a crime, you need a real attorney. And here's just a few reasons why. The police, the courts, the labs, the drug tests, probation, the judges, the jails, the prisons, and the entire system is just one big machine. They have one objective: take your freedom, take your possessions, take your money, take your children, control your life, and destroy your future. You only get one chance to hire the right attorney. One that will stay in your corner. One that will fight for your rights. One that will fight for your freedom. Choose an attorney that's experienced in fighting the justice machine. Attorney Michael Komorn. Knockout victories one case at a time. Komorn Law. Google it. komornlaw.com.
Bill Schuette led the charge against medical marijuana, and even after the will of the voters was decided and the support was enormous, he still continued to fight against the will of the voters, keeping patients from the medicine that they need. So I think it's important that we all speak up on what we think about this initiative. But when the voters have their say, their will must stand.
I am Earl from G3 Cannabis Therapy Network, and you are watching Planet Green Trees, the original and #1 podcast in Michigan for all things cannabis and legal news.
Here's Michael Komorn with more Planet Green Trees.
All right, we're back. Thanks for staying with us. You're listening to Planet Green Trees, episode number 540, Stuck in the Moment. We have Lev Birndorf and Benjamin Rosman from PSI Labs, and we've been asking them to try to explain this crazy scandal that's taking place. Marijuana Regulatory Agency issues a recall of selected marijuana products. Still unclear, and there's an ongoing investigation. First, before we get to the remediation and the Delta 8, Delta 10 stuff, What do you think the likelihood of some kind of complaint coming out of this in some way where there's, and this happens all the time. If you violate the rules and the compliance, they'll charge you with a complaint. We've represented many persons in that companies. And do you think that's likely to happen? Or do you think something worse? Ben, you're the lawyer. What do you think from a legal perspective? You're aware of, they publish, I know you know, but they publish all the results of the complaints that may be filed against licensees. It's interesting because it's sometimes, like we actually created what I would call like the guidelines of acts that resulted in certain penalties, so you can kind of gauge over time what, where you would stand on the guidelines and other references of similar situations. But I know we're still at the beginning part of it, but just based on the numbers, Ben, do you think that this stands for something that will result in some kind of licensure action taken? Sanction, a fine, or
yeah, I mean, there will at the very least there's going to be a fine. What they'll do beyond that is hard to say, and when they'll do it is also hard to say. Again, they say there's an ongoing investigation, so it's possible they're just sort of stacking up the different charges and they'll drop them all at once. It's difficult when we're kind of operating in this industry where Lev was giving the example earlier where labs, sort of the bare entry is having a driver's license and that's it. But if you're driving around and having hit and run accidents and then getting a little, slap on the wrist and you can get a Lamborghini every month, that's not a functioning system. So I think we have to see what MRA is going to do in terms of enforcement. And is it going to be a fine? What is the fine going to be? And will that even rise to the level of a real sanction? Because we can see with like 30 pages worth of recalls for 3 months, this lab has had the lion's share of.
Yeah, let's talk about that. What's the percentage? So of the totality of the marketplace of flower, is it true? And we're in the medley round now, so the questions are going to be trying to be more precise and the answers have to be shorter. Okay, so what is the percentage, Ben, of the marketplace that this laboratory tests for flower, if you know?
I'm not sure. I think in an interview they said I think they said 2/3 of flower business.
2/3. Wow, that's a lot.
That's what they said.
That's insane. That's more than half, if I'm not mistaken. All right, here's another medley round question. How much of the cannabis, this flower that we're talking about, is remediated that gets into the packages on the shelves, number one? And number two, is it true that this information should be provided to the consumer? Lev, what do you say?
That's a tough one. I see both sides of that. I think in other industries, there's a lot of precedent set where they are allowed to remediate like your food and things like that, and you don't know about it. So from the side of safety testing, I kind of get that. And that's, that approach of, look, if it passes the test when it gets to the shelf, it passes the test. Whether you have to do some sort of kill step in there or not, that's on you. And it's a business choice. And, you shouldn't have to tell everyone about your process that gets there. I could see that side, but I could also see the side of, I kind of want to know if it was irradiated and had mold in it at one point versus if it hadn't. I do think it's more of like a quality issue than a safety issue. As long as it is passing the safety test in a valid test, in a valid lab, it's good to go. But, from the quality standpoint and consumer, kind of, what would you call that? Consumer awareness or disclosure. It probably is. There's an argument.
Transparency is the word I think you're looking for. Transparency.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. And I mean, we still don't know if there are, and I don't want to be alarmist, but we don't know what the short-term, long-term effects may be of irradiated. I mean, maybe there's some studies.
But we also don't know the long-term effects maybe of smoking moldy weed your entire life.
That's true. But that would be a non-pass, and then we just have shortages, I guess, is what we'd end up with, right? Right? I don't know. Somewhere in there.
What about the timing with all of this stuff, with the with this whole lab failure, I guess, or violation, recall, whatever you want to call it. And then on, the MCMA push. And what do you think that maybe some of this was intentional, or do you think it was just...
No, I'm going to answer that. The answer is that this was not intended to be helpful to the caregivers, when in fact it is. I think it puts under this circumstance, I think anyone that was thinking about doing a vote, thinking about moving some things around based on safety or testing should pause, step back, and really ask the bigger question, like, how could some of this go on? How could this organization, these organizations that are pushing safety, have such a major flaw in the safety that they're promising, and then still have the audacity and gall to criticize the safety of other people's cannabis that they're providing? I want to know this, though. Here we go. Give me this one. When they say 10% uncertainty budget error rate, this is a favorite of mine, and I know it's not a big. What do they mean? So if they report 30% THC, which is accurate to 10% error rate, are they saying that it's plus or minus 3?
That's correct.
Okay, it's not
10% absolute. It's 10% relative.
Okay, and do you? And that error rate is provided by the lab itself. It's got to be these validation.
Yeah, we have
process.
to demonstrate that that's valid within our process. Yeah. So we tend to try and do a little better than that in general too, but you don't want to set yourself a trap and be like too narrow. That's a very reasonable margin of error for most lab tests. But for, as I mentioned, for potency, for example, it's a little harder to notice it in a flower, right? But if I had a crystalline THCA and I'm off by 10%, you're going to be like, oh, 104%, this is great, but if you think about it, that's clearly kind of nonsense, right?
Right. Do you think that the lab is the one that produces it, and then they say, the way that we're doing it, you're assured that the reported value is, within a 10% error rate, but it's based upon the performance and data collected over time to validate that number. That's exactly what you do. So, but it's kind of what you were saying before about the the trust or the faith in the labs themselves. So there's some there could be some manipulation there from the scrupulous or nefarious actor in a lab. That's an area that can be
it's quite easy to manipulate data in a lab should you want to.
All right. So let's talk about Delta 8 now. So let me explain a little history. Rob, of course, is from the Helping Friendly Salve. I always mispronounce it, and I appreciate you being around.
His products are awesome.
Products are often. But 2 weeks ago, at around the same time that the MRA had denounced that all Delta 8 products that are associated with hemp and whatnot, including those that, they were really speaking to like the vape Delta 8, Delta 10 that may be sold at, stores that are not licensed per se. But there's also all this other hemp and CBD product that is all over the place that is not necessarily within that intended reach of Delta 8. And then Rob, who some of his products are on the shelves in retail stores, which, Rob, I'm assuming to do that, they have to be tested, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but they're being sold as hemp extract, full plant hemp extract. Is that right?
Yep.
All right.
Full spectrum.
Full spectrum. No manipulation. No chemical enhancement or just systems of synthesize of any kind. And your product is on the shelf. It's advertised as such. It's got X amount of CBD, CBG, CBA, whatever, and trace amounts of Delta 8, right?
The last oil that we had, yes, had trace amounts of Delta 8 in it as part of the thing.
Okay. So the question is
this. Since fix that.
I know, but is that naturally occurring there, or did that develop from?
That portion of it, I really don't know. It was a full spectrum oil that was sold to us. So I'm guessing that it was just part of the, the actual extraction for it. Again, trace.
Right, but you bought
I have
a batch.
Question,
you bought a batch, and it happened to have some Delta 8 in it, right?
Yep.
All right. First, Ben or Lev, is Delta 8 a naturally occurring cannabinoid in the cannabis sativa L plant? Yes or no?
I'd say like marginally. I think that's the consensus now. Very tiny amounts seem to appear, but I'm of the opinion that they're so tiny, I don't necessarily feel they've established the difference between them and an artifact at this point. If something's a really small effect, there's always a chance you introduce that somehow during the process. And I truthfully haven't kept up on exactly where they left off of that, but more often than not, it is, what you'd call a synthetic or semi-synthetic byproduct, in a sense, of some part of the processing.
I understand, and I want to stay away from that for 1 second. I just am interested in is there a requirement to test for Delta 8 in flour, for example?
Yeah, but it's never there.
Never.
No, the only thing I've ever seen that was clearly a product someone made to mimic flour using Delta 8. So it was had natural CBGA in it and CBDA, indicating it was hemp, and they were not decarbed, indicating the plant hadn't been heated. But then it had decarbed Delta 8 on it, which could only happen if someone basically sprayed oil on it. Yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
It's a common thing in any Delta 8 sold flour is just CBG flour that's been sprayed.
Yeah.
So in order to get that much of it, you would have to have a big, massive amount of material to.
Yeah, and that's why hemp is the only way that it makes sense to even come close to even trying to do that with.
What's the
because of the amount of CBD isolate that's really out there.
Okay, so that's what it is. It's the CBD that is manipulated to make the Delta 8. It's
converted, yes.
All right, and there's a process. So this is Lev. Is this synthetic? Is it a synthetically created?
Yeah, I mean, by the technical definition of synthesis, then that's what you'd call that. I mean, I'd call it semi-synthetic. You're taking a cannabinoid and synthesizing another cannabinoid from that. So that's an arbitrary distinction from, say, taking different non-cannabinoid precursors and doing it. But yeah,
like synthetic THC is made from moss and fungus or something, right? Two other plants as opposed to. But it is coming from the CBD. I mean, the cannabis.
It's a good starting material because it's already similar, So it's a good place to start. Less steps to get there.
But it's strange to me because it must be identified, somewhere naturally occurring, and someone must have thought enough to say, "Hey, gee, how can we get more of that?" Right? I mean, it must have presented itself in some place and been desirable enough, to want to mimic or recreate. And I mean, who knew that whatever the transformations to get it there, that's pretty wild as well. But especially being able to replicate the Delta 8, right, from something else.
Sure.
Yeah, I think some of that they just kind of figured out when they started playing around with cannabinoids. Sure. Once they started isolating them, and Delta 8 is sort of chemically, from what I understand, more stable than Delta 9. So in a lot of ways, if you're messing around in a chemistry lab with cannabinoids and changing pHs and stuff, you're almost driving it toward that molecule.
Mm-hmm. And
So Rob, is it fair to say I would, there wasn't enough information known
might not
at the
be
time.
naturally occurring.
What's that?
It might not be naturally occurring in what he had tested.
That's exactly right. He bought I'm assuming he bought some mass and then made some stuff, right? That's probably what happened, and it came with a certification of some kind. And this industry is, apparently there's some spraying or what may take. That's what you're writing it off as, correct?
Yeah, I mean, basically, what we had to do is just reformulate essentially this full spectrum oil to not include it. I mean.
But it wouldn't be in it, is what we understand. It's not naturally occurring, and if it was, it'd be so trace that it would be indistinguishable.
But again, that's what I mean. There was a number that showed up on a test. It was not considered non-detectable.
I understand. I'm saying.
So therefore, it was no matter what that amount was, and I don't have the test in front of me to tell you exactly what it was.
Right.
But it was just, 0.00 whatever. Still well underneath total THC compliance completely.
Right.
Correct. By a good number.
Because 0.03% THC is considered trace amounts of THC, right? And you're saying, but here's I'm trying to resolve this because it seems, I saw there being a tremendous amount of concern for all cannabis sativa plant products because if trace amounts exist naturally, they will be detected, and trace amount detection then becomes a concern of the MRA. And it's not from some other, I'm going to use this word loosely, synthesized or created source that happens to be mixed with or sprayed with, then that would be really concerning. You know what I mean? But if it's not so naturally occurring and the trace amounts that are so minuscule, then the hemp plant itself should not be producing it. The cannabis sativa plant should not be producing, the natural, the legal THC, the non-legal THC plants are just going to have the same amount of Delta 8, unless they're breeding it. I guess maybe they could breed it. But generally speaking, as opposed to the amounts that are appearing that are of concern or get past that trace amounts, which are added on in some way, like that the source is what I'm saying. It was not completely organic. Would be the? Do you agree with that? That would be the conclusion. It was not completely organic.
I would say so. I mean,
we don't know
portion of it,
right? But I'm saying because the plant itself could not produce an amount that would be detectable.
Otherwise, nobody's ever seen it yet on a test like that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it indicates that however this oil was processed, it triggered some amount of this Delta 8 to develop from one of the other cannabinoids, whether it was CBD, Delta 9, whatever, So I think you're right on in that the original plants they started to process did not have it, and when it finished, it was there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so that resolves that, but then of course the caveat is who knows if they're going to start. I mean, I'm sure they could breed it, right? They could breed higher levels of Delta 8 at some point. It's probably going to happen, right?
We might be able to discuss this.
As more naturally. Yeah, when that happens, we'll come back and we'll revisit this as a...
and there's people waiting to get onto another discussion, too.
No, I got that. But let's see. So what Rob, any reports on that? I mean, resolving that issue. I was concerned. I mean, if it was true that it's naturally occurring, every marijuana, cannabis, sativa person is going to have issues. If it could be showing up in obviously the MRA is targeting and testing for this and perceiving it as the new, illicit per se, I guess, and dangerous and whatnot. But
well, I think they're really just trying to make it so that because they haven't banned it.
Well,
but it's the whole movement underneath the MRA to do that. And again, we know that nobody's going to be able to grow enough cannabis plants to be able to do it.
It's not.
Nobody's going to be doing it for that reason.
It's not.
It's only going to be happening through the conversion of hemp.
Right. It's not banned, but it's certainly not allowable. I mean, it's prohibited.
Yeah, no. There's a lot of different things of it. On one hand, I'm not allowed to sell it in the state.
Delta 8.
However, I'm not allowed to sell it in the state. Of course,
right. Okay.
However,
some states you can.
I've been told I can sell it out of here.
I don't know about that. I mean, I just saw where in Kansas City they just raided a place.
That's from MRA.
Texas.
They're raiding everything. Oh, they took.
We sell a lot of it throughout the country.
Well, it's
Florida's a huge hotbed for it right now, with all the other. Delta 10, Delta 8.
All that state
I get it in writing. I get it in writing from them.
All of it.
Ask them if they'll pay for your attorney fees also. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, and maybe they will. I just, the MRA is in a very, very powerful position in this regard. They're giving legal advice, clearly. They're telling you about transporting, cannabinoid across state lines. Who the hell knows? And I'm not saying, it's always been suspect to me. And hemp itself, we know, is past the test. But I
do think some of the DEA recent talk of them saying that it is legal.
That's true.
Underneath, but that is somewhat of what has caused this to be a little bit more of a, pump the brakes a little bit.
You're right, and I'm not trying to cause any fear. I take issue with the MRA banning it because they made it illegal to ingest. It's their concern, safety. None of it's going to be allowable until we get.
They need to have Veritas tested
until they test it because the MRA is, they're not. But but you can sell it across state lines. Go ahead, find a sucker state, and they'll give it to them for the danger and let them be the guinea pigs. And that's that's troubling to me. Number one,
sense.
And also that they are participating in this. I really watch them regain the authority along the way here to schedule these new cannabinoids that are going to be coming on the market. Watch it happen. That's a prediction here. November 18th. The MRA will take on the scheduling of all cannabinoids. Watch it happen. How could they do that? They're a licensing agency, but they will be in charge of it at some point because.
It will be.
Because they rule the world.
Because they rule the world, unfortunately. But all right. So what do you got? You guys, what are your thoughts on this Delta 8, Delta 10? Ben, I asked If you have any comments, and I felt like you had a lot of opinion on it. Go ahead, opine.
Oh yeah, I don't know about a lot of opinions. I just think that Delta 8 is something. I think it's really interesting that I don't know that we're taking a hardline stance on in Michigan, but we're regulating it by sort of regulating it out of the state. But it's not as psychoactive as Delta 9 THC. It's not necessarily dangerous. It's getting so much press right now. We get asked fairly repeatedly if we want to comment on Delta 8 THC just from the lab perspective. Is this dangerous? Is this something to be concerned about? What does the lab have to say? And it's just, they say 75% of psychoactive is Delta 9 THC.
I don't know how they figured that out. They just gave it to people and asked them how high they were, I'm pretty sure.
Listen,
that's been the science for so many years.
Yeah, it's the subjective analysis.
I've been taking issue lately with the term psychoactive because I think it's arbitrary. It's not really scientific. It kind of means a lot of things to a lot of different people. It certainly doesn't mean impaired per se. You know what I mean? It certainly could be something else. And the loosely use of it and its association with its evil in THC Delta 9 is somehow just easily been placed as a definer onto Delta 8. And it's deja vu all over again. It's like the same thing about Delta 9. They're just like throwing it out there, and the whole concern of cannabis was that it had THC, right? That was the danger. That was the whole thing. And now they're just running a new. It's all based on some falsities of overinflated concerns that are not based, and there's certainly not enough NHTSA studies to back any of that up. I'll tell you that. But
Mike, I have a little bit of a chime in on that, I'd say, which is that, I totally agree that Delta 8 is like proven to be not dangerous, as probably most cannabinoids, if not all of them so far are. And it's looking at it that way, a new cannabinoid tool that may be a little bit different version of Delta 9, but that still is really helpful and maybe more helpful to some people. It's amazing that way. The one issue I think that we need to look at and be on our radar about is
testing.
How are they making this stuff? Because
testing.
It's different. Yeah, well, it's different than extracting something. And when you do synthesis, there is a million different chemicals you could use that have varying levels of toxicity that are going to produce different types of byproducts. And this is like what all goes on in the pharma industry and what these people have to prove to get their drugs out on the shelf. And there's an argument to be made that's legitimate from a chemist standpoint that once you jump from taking something out of something in alcohol and then removing that alcohol, so making RSO, and then even distilling that material further, or using butane to extract it. You haven't jumped that line to synthesis, and you know that what went into that process does not include any number of uncontrolled catalysts and chemicals that could produce byproducts that you're not even checking for. So without more oversight on this process, I do think there's risk there, and there's risk that it's not even being looked at on the downstream side to see if it is a hazard. So 100%, I can tell you right now, some of the things people use and are using to make this stuff are known to produce carcinogenic byproducts, for example, and no one is looking at those right now. So, I wouldn't say that it's sort of two issues, right, that are being mixed together a little, but there's some validity to that part of it, I guess.
You know what? I agree with you, and I wasn't trying to be loose about it, and your point is well taken. This is a synthesized cannabinoid. It's not naturally occurring, period. And because of that means there's a process, and the process is what may draw concerns. I did see that the federal government has deemed Delta 8 on its own to be a neuroprotectant. What I understand. If done right, obviously if done right, it's not dangerous. But I was more on the surface of the way they have categorized it and the way they've mentioned it. That's not always part of the narrative, if at all. It's more, it's unknown and blah, blah. But it should not be about it being, I I think it just gets too much. It's, the association with Delta 9 sounding makes it dangerous instead of how it's made. All right, enough about that. I don't want to torture you guys anymore. I know we have a couple of other guests that are waiting for me to cross-examine them as well. But if you guys, what questions didn't I ask you that I should have asked you? Let me do it that way. Before I let you go, hey, Ben, what question should have I asked you, if any, that I didn't ask you?
What kind of question is that?
That's a good question.
It sounds like one that takes up a lot
Ben,
more
did you hear
time.
me? No.
That's a really good question. I can't think of anything. Okay. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I really enjoyed being on the podcast and appreciate it.
Appreciate you taking questions. You guys got to come back. We got to, there's obviously be some follow up, and but you've given us some insight to some of the workings behind the scenes, and it seems really dirty. I got to tell you, I feel like I need a shower right now. Just kidding.
I'd like to hear about part one of the conversation that you really coolly kind of avoided and didn't talk about that as much. I think that deserves its own podcast.
What's that?
We can cover that another time.
What's that? What is he talking about? The first part?
The whole state police angle.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't really get into that as much.
Well, I was going to say this. You mentioned Leafly as the source of a lot of the testing and procedures and stuff, and I just will give another shot of her. Leafly did the 22-page story, one of 22, on the Michigan medical marijuana frame-up covering the Max Lorenz from way back when. Bruce Barcott did a phenomenal story. It's really in-depth, cites all the nonsense cases and police and prosecutor influence in the decision making and policy making, and it's I give a lot of credit for them. The depth of the investigation in the author that put that together. But Lev, you would concur with that. They've been one of the leaders in the science behind the cannabis, which I think is important. Obviously,
yeah, they're a great platform.
All right, I'm going to let you guys go. I really appreciate you coming. I got a promise to come back. You can hang out. You don't have to go. I was going to move on to. I know Jamie and we got a couple other people. Mike, I think, are in the queue as well. Whatever your pleasure is, guys. But all right, so thank you. That's Lev and Ben from PSI Labs in Ann Arbor. Go test your marijuana.
Thanks, everyone.
Get it taken care of. Get those THC levels. Check them out. All right, so who's next? What are we doing? Let me see here. We got Jamie Cooper, of course, calling. Jamie, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you coming on. She's still here with us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
There you are. Okay. First of all, thank you for coming on. I know there's a story, a news article, and it's kind of interesting, and it's kind of in the middle of some of these different things that are kind of spinning around in and around the cannabis community. And so the article was reporting on this thing that had taken place, and you're involved with Sensi Magazine and how you were put on a list of some kind regarding the boycott of a boycott list of some kind. Am I explaining the background to what occurred today in this article?
Yes, actually, so the Grand Rapids Business Journal reached out to me a couple of weeks ago, and the reporter originally, she was contacting me for a 2-year anniversary article about adult use legalization in Michigan. So answered a lot of questions around that. And then one of the questions that she had given me was around the boycott, and started asking more questions. And the story ended up being about that, which is fine. And so the backstory is that of course, the MCMA has several companies that have paid them to go lobby and try to remove Caregivers' rights to grow their 72 plants. And a lot of the companies that are part of the organization are on that boycott list that was put together by Medical Mondays. And I was added, so I did a promotion. Chelsea Handler came to Grand Rapids on her comedy tour, and she's an advocate of cannabis. So I put together a basket, a floral arrangement, a massive floral arrangement, and I sent an email to all the advertisers of my magazine and asked them if they wanted to donate products to the floral arrangement, and they all got the same opportunity. And some of them were like, yes, we want to be a part of it, and some of them were not a part of it. And I took what I had, and we made this arrangement and delivered it to Chelsea Handler. And that promotion landed me on the boycott list because there were two of my advertisers that were on the boycott list that donated products to it, and so that's kind of what happened.
All right, and have you taken some feedback, some pushback on this from people? I mean, obviously, if you're on a list, that's not good. Or, I mean, I don't know if you care, but I'm saying, has it impacted you in any ways that you felt to be hurtful, or what? What's been your reaction to this?
I think it was more hurtful to me personally, because I do wear my heart on my sleeve and have been a part of the movement here in Michigan for the last 7 years. And I'm in this industry because I got here in the end of 2014 and was seeing all the caregiver raids, and I was pissed. I mean, I became an advocate because I wanted to stop seeing people get arrested for a plant. I had saw it in a different light living in Colorado, and it just made me angry. And I felt like it was a good opportunity to stand up and use my voice for what I believed in. And so, the people in the community that know me know what I stand for. And I've had a lot of people, reach out to me and just say that they support me and they're sorry that this is going on, because they know who I am. And I did go on the podcast and tried to, explain my position and where I am on the issue. I don't own Cincy Magazine. In fact, I merged my business, Cannabis Connection, I built solely on my own, and I merged it with them last year. And I can't speak for them as a company. I do represent them as a company, but it's a shame, but it is what it is.
Understood. Well, especially since you had the sympathy for the caregivers that kind of drew you into this, I'm sure you understand. I imagine like some of the pushback where it exists was coming from the voice of the caregivers. Associating the MCA with the anti-caregiver legislation that's occurring. I didn't get a chance. How did it go on Medical Mondays? Did you feel like I'm just curious to. Because let's make it clear, it's Medical Mondays that created the list, right? They're the ones that
Correct.
are the list makers. So how was that interaction? I'm curious.
I think it went good. I felt like they better understood where I was. They did say that I was taking it personally. I took it personally because I started getting personally attacked over it by, some in the community, and that hurt. And it's a lot of people that I've never, ever met. And some of them I have met, but I took it personal for that reason, because it's not what I represent. It's not what I stand for. I have no affiliation with the MCMA. I've never even met Steve Linder. So
can I ask you this? Was the boycott for Cincy Magazine, or was it for Jamie Cooper?
They say it was for Cincy Magazine because we are taking advertising money from these companies.
Right. Would that make a difference for your takeaway? I'm curious because, you made a good point. Like I merged my business. I'm a pro caregiver. I'm affiliated with this company. I represent them. I don't make the shots. Maybe in a different week or month, I may have, that may have been enough for me to leave, but it's not Jimmy Cooper making that decision. I'm merely one of the employees, by an employment relationship of some kind. Does that make a difference? Because, it was, as far as, was that something that mattered to them when you interacted with whomever on Medical Mondays?
Yeah, I think they did a really good job of hearing me out, and they asked a lot of great questions, and I appreciate the opportunity. some people on that boycott list will not go on there. And I felt like I needed to. I felt like I wanted to be better understood by those that didn't really understand where I stood on the issue.
But you're not.
They were very respectful.
Sure, and you're not specifically boycotted. It's not. It's Sensi magazine, but because,
No,
right? Okay.
Correct.
And this month, next month, and months in the past, they may have even had advertisements from some of the companies that were on the MCMA, or they're part of the MCMA. Is that true?
If they had advertised it, or me, or
no, I mean,
well, yeah, like, so we launched the Michigan magazine. We launched the Michigan magazine back in 2019, late 2019, and we started selling it late 2018. We started trying to build it then, and some of those advertisers we have like 3-year contracts with, agreements with, that came with them, helping us get the magazine launched. And I'm not sure if the MCMA was around. I think that they may have been. I had never really heard about them until, in the past few months. But yeah, they signed advertising agreements, and Cincy, they're aware of the issue. Obviously, we got some backlash from some of the caregiver community in our social media, right. But it's hard for them to keep tabs on these types of situations in all the market where they have their magazines.
Right.
And
I mean, first of all, your explanation that the magazine started, there was no MCMA. There's companies that have dollars that they want to spend in advertising. They want to help a local magazine. They want to get their name out. Blah 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 blah. Relationships are made. Contracts are developed, and then. They joined the devil, like you can't help that. Like, I mean, I'm saying there's nothing, there's contracts, and you're not the other side of it. They're doing Sensi magazine. You may be the representative or the, sales rep or whatever. So that's understood and whatnot. And obviously the decision there is if it's going to honor the contract. Maybe you call that a, if there's an out on the contract, if someone's going to press that issue. But it's understood. You can't predict all these things. I guess but. You obviously understand the sensitivity of caregivers, especially if they've gone through. I mean, if you've had sympathy, as you would know, you've had sympathy for them. It was not an easy role. There's 12, 14 years of just carnage and forfeiture and felonies and being tortured, and after all this time, surviving that, right? We that community fought off the police, the prosecutors, the legislators, on a shoestring budget, and a bunch of advocates that loved the plant and were passionate about it, and by education, and we're 12, 14 years into it, and none of those same people are there at the legislature, anymore. They're completely vapid of any of the experiences that we've gone through here, and then to even suggest that after all of that and legalization, that this would be one of the things on the chopping block. You can understand how that would. That is so enraging from the people that have gone through this and the role that they've played, that it almost it's like war. It's like war words. It's like fighting words, so to speak. You know what I mean? I sense that. And I could get that. But I do think at the other side, and I just want to be, just objectively speaking, I think it's, and I'm not speaking to the guys at Medical Mondays. When you hear, at any time, I don't care where you are in the history, whatever, that somebody's got a list. So a person's got a list, not a objective board of individuals that are appointed as, or someone that's there's a responsibility or accountability for the list, the standards that are set forth. And I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong. I am not vetting that. I don't take issue with whatever they declare to be on the list. But I'm saying there's been lists in history. The what am I trying to say?
The shit list.
No, the McCarthy era and the blacklisting, people that were perceived as being communists and red, you
don't want to be on that list.
But I'm just saying, people were losing their jobs. It was boycotting them. They would get hired. They would go underground. They get arrested, and it was a terrible time because affiliations cause these things, and it can got out of control. There's political involvement. I'm not associating this with that particular.
Right.
Thing.
I mean, we understand why this is happening, though, right?
Of course.
It's not like it was unprovoked.
No, I'm acknowledging, and I think Jamie is as well, that the passion in this community is so strong and so intense with protecting these caregiver rights that anyone that crosses, any line with anybody's, is going to be, is potentially going to get a reaction from that. I mean, it's,
they crossed the goddamn shit line. Jim Leahy.
That's right. But is it impact?
Well, and the huge thing about this is like the beautiful thing about Michigan is ballot initiatives. I mean, that's how we got the 2008 law through. That's how we got adult use. And not every state has that. But when the people vote on something and then the legislative body try to take it away, that's pretty fucked up.
Well, it's not just you're absolutely right. And you know what else, Jamie? The connection here is it's not just they weren't sitting around. What can we do? They were busy passing laws so that elected officials, spouses could get a marijuana license. That's what they were worried about. They weren't worried about the MMA.
No.
This evilness was planted in their head by one organization alone, the MCMA. It is a root of evil. It is an idea of evil. It is an attempt to capitalize and dominate the market in a way that is framed with this tax and regulate BS that they want to dominate. And it is patently insane that they would even consider doing this. It's they were not around before. They are new to the field, and now they want to own it and declare that all the cannabis in the state of Michigan has to be purchased by them. If we let them have their way, they're going to get rid of caregivers and the entire patient. There's going to be no medical place anymore.
Oh, they'll just kill the medical program.
They're going to kill the medical program. The patients aren't. Anyways, so it's a very escalating problem because the depth of dominance that they're playing in the market and this laboratory I believe is one of the labs that test for the MCMA. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They have 2/3 of the marketplace.
Do we know
of testing.
that?
Yes, we know that for sure. It's unquestionable. Jamie, you want to confirm that?
Yeah, that's what I heard. There's like 60% of the market was tested by this company.
Two-thirds is what the
PSI just said 2/3. I mean, that's so. The point is
plus
that
50% for sure. I've heard. Yeah.
Right. So there's a dominance to the market, and see, here's the thing. What's taking place, it's beyond just the caregivers because their dominance and influence in the political frame here is also dominating in the number of licenses that are being owned by these entities to keep buying other ones up. They're a direct, violent threat to destroy mom and pop businesses. The more that they dominate and buy up and become vertically integrated all over the place, the less need there'll be for mom and pop business. It goes without saying. If they can make it, process it, and sell it for less down the chain versus the expense of growing and selling and shipping, it goes without saying they're in a better position.
Right.
So, and they want to remain in that position. And as long as there's fewer seats at the table, they will continue to dominate in that position. And they're doing everything they can to maintain that. That's and by.
I think it's more than that.
Well,
because I mean, in a normal market, they would simply compete with the black market and provide the same value.
Or better,
at a lower
right.
price. And the problem is that the system in Michigan doesn't allow for that. So,
well, that's a problem. The end user's not considered in any of the ways this thing's been set up. But a caregivers program, all they care about is the end user, right? And they got customers.
No.
So, I mean, I'm saying, even the illicit market, I should say, not caregivers, but the illicit market, they care about getting good product.
Yeah, I'm not even talking about caregivers.
Right.
I'm talking about just the straight up black
So they're
market.
either going to have to entice the illicit market into the regulated market by giving access to it. That's one way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Or the regulated market is going to be more consumer driven. We're a long way away from it. I think this announcement about the testing flaws suggests that
I mean, do you think the average consumer really gives a shit? I mean, truly, do you even think they know? Like there was one news article today. I mean, I realize we're hypersensitive to it, but most people probably have no fucking idea.
That's a good
You're
question.
probably right, Jim. you're probably right on that. I think we get wrapped up in it, but maybe just from the regular person coming into a shop, they may not be as concerned. Like if I'm going to the grocery store, if we're going to relate it to that, like but Lev and Ben were saying too, is that you don't really think about what process it took to get there. So
I do sometimes.
I guess from a regular, I mean, it situationally, I mean, if I go into a certain place, I'm going to wonder what happened to it, but
like fish, like
Yeah.
where the fish came from and how many
You can go to Whole
buckets it had.
Foods and it'll
It's
tell you where
not
the
supposed
fish comes from.
Right. Well, I'm just saying, like how many planes it's been on, and how many fucking buckets it's been in, and how many
Yeah.
freezers it's been stored in. It's
how
like
many ice cubes were underneath it.
Well, I'm just saying, like it's not, how many human hands were touching it, and like the water it was in, and I don't know. It's not.
All good things.
But Jamie, I'm curious. I know, Jamie, of course, is I don't know exactly, but
he's responsible for
Grand
everything.
Rapids area, the western part of the central western part of the state. What's the the question is rhetorically: does anybody care what just happened? Is it such a big deal? Komorn's ranting and raving. We had a couple.
I mean,
PSI
we
people.
care,
Does
I
Grand
think.
Rapids care? Is anyone talking about it out there? What's within the Sensi magazine people? I mean, are they trying to I don't know, separate from varieties?
Is this topic all the rage?
Yeah, it's the topic of the rage in Grand Rapids. Are you guys just talking about martinis and and the DeVosses and stuff? I don't know.
No, I mean, I'm really not. It's the community that's hearing about it. The regulated community, like the amount of people that are terrified of landing on that list, like it's mind blowing. Like so many people have talked to me about it and just I think they feel bad for me because they have feared that because maybe they carry one of the products or even ancillary providers that do business and might service some of these companies, whether they're CPA or a marketing company or something like that, they fear being put on this list, and they fear it affecting their business in a negative way. And I can't say that it hasn't really negatively impacted my business. I held an event last night. People showed up. The magazine are still going into the consumer's hands. We try to promote caregiver events. The caregiver rally was written about in our event. We have tried to, we're here for the community as a whole. We want to see the community as a whole prosper. And we're going to continue doing what we need to do to bring our community together and work together. So, but Grand Rapids, no, I really haven't heard a whole lot from people in the community that aren't involved in the industry.
Well, what about this testing scandal? Are they talking about that at all over in Grand Rapids? Is that something that people are? I'm
over on the east right now. I'm actually here in Detroit tonight, and I was last night as well. So, but. So I'm at an industry event. It was put on by Dick Al. It's called Power Connections. Yep. And there are a lot of operators here. Yep. Andrew Brisboe spoke tonight. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone is talking about it all day long, and
it's at the Towns or something, isn't it? Is that what it is?
It is.
All right. So what did Brisboe say? What was he defending it? Was he did he give any insight as to the? And Jamie was live streaming it, weren't you? Is that what's going on?
I saw somebody put it live on Facebook Live for a few minutes. Yeah.
So was he?
Yeah. So he pretty much said that he is doing. He feels like what he's doing is going to fix the issue pretty quickly. That they are planning to spend the next day or two, even through the weekend if they need to, getting everything back on track from this.
So he didn't.
And he didn't say a whole lot.
Didn't.
I'm surprised they didn't sneak him through the back door because I'm sure everyone wanted to talk to him.
Did it suggest that the problem has been resolved and we're just going to move on and Verities is going to be fine, or did he suggest that
they're already testing again?
Yeah, that's what I heard. That they're already testing. They're free. They're testing free. for
Come
all the
on.
products that were affected. And
Well,
I'm already
they're
hearing
paying for the
companies
testing, maybe. 'Cause
No.
they-
The retesting product, that's one of the options on the recall.
Yeah, and their
that they
facility
themselves retested.
their
after they fucked
facility
it up?
is operating right now as we speak.
Right.
And they can.
Right.
I don't know why they would possibly want to go back to that company.
Because
it's free.
They pass them.
Because they get high THC results.
Wow.
But
they
just
have
lost
60%
so
of the
much
market.
so much money on 3 months worth of product they're going to have to do something with, and they're going to go back to these people. Yeah. Hold on.
Wow, that's great. So you got the impression that, as a quoting a police officer from South Park, nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here. Move right along. Right? It was one of those. Officer Barberry.
Yeah.
It was, he says that he thinks he has that it will be corrected over the next few days. It's nobody's really talking about what the consequences will be out of this. I haven't heard.
And they weren't really specific about what they discovered.
Don't get us stern talking.
They alluded to some sweet, like unknowns and unreported and inaccuracies and whatever. But
they're going to get a fine, just like Iron Labs got a fine when they took some heat.
Listen, I don't know. I know when Iron Labs was caught changing data or something within entry data stuff, it was not at this scale. There's quotes out there that 64,000 pounds of marijuana, which equates to $200 million worth of product that, came from a place, was sold after being tested, went onto a shelf, it's in inventory somewhere, and it's got to be accounted for because it's all not any longer available for sale, right? So it's a lot of people, like some businesses, only a few businesses can withstand that kind of loss of inventory. If you're going to stock your shelves with millions of dollars worth of inventory to try to get people in there of, tested with a stamp on it, and you're going to justify selling it for that much because of the testing and the stamp, it's a strike in the face of the consumer.
Yep.
It's a strike in the face of the retailers because they've been frauded. They got to put up with that shit. They want to go to the next level. They got to get, people coming in not buying stuff, returning stuff. Remember that scene from Breaking Away? Refund. The dad has a heart attack. The guy's trying to bring the car back in. Like refund. But that's like the nightmare. You know what I mean? Nobody got that reference. It's okay, but. So I don't know. It's a lot. I think it's much. Listen. I'm not defending Iron Labs. I'm not saying. And we were talking earlier about the various, all of the complaints that happen against operators are published, right? Like if there's a complaint made, I don't know if the complaint is not published, but the outcome, there's an order, a consent judgment usually, or a trial or something. But there's a outcome, and they list it in as a. This company had this happen, and this is what their thing was. So there's a whole series of penalties that exist out there. And I was joking that, like in criminal law, there's a thing called the guidelines, the sentencing guidelines, which set forth a methodology by which an individual with a certain record, according to this offense that they're charged with, would come in, and there'd be some predictable sentence, like a range of what the sentence would be, instead of it just being arbitrary. Like, we don't like your haircut or you're too tall, we're going to give you 50 years. It's got to be based on some kind of...
That'll make you shorter. Oh, come on. That was funny.
I know. But where was I talking? Where was I?
You were talking about 50 years for being tall.
Yeah, but all right, so the MRA's punishments as they attribute these things have been, they're creating what kind of punishment for this kind of behavior. So it all exists out there, and I'm suggesting that this could be seen as this is like RICO. I don't think of like the racketeering murder for hire. It's like as bad as in terms of administrative flaws, where the entire premise of the regulated system is provide safety through lab testing, and they failed. I mean, and it's hundreds of millions of dollars worth of product. I don't know that there's anything that is of that magnitude that any operator, one individual operator, has the impact upon, right? I mean, can you think of anything else? Jamie?
No.
Jamie says no. Okay. I don't know. It would be interesting to see.
Not.
Yeah, I don't think.
Well, I mean, there's an easy way to fix this, but it
how
includes more regulation. You got to limit the number of tests that each.
Well, fix means to correct the problem. You're not saying to make people whole.
No,
like there's that
I'm
loss.
talking to fix the problem going forward. The people now, I mean, you're fucked. Like that sucks, man. But at the end of the day, that's just everybody's eggs were all in one basket. If you know, dispensaries and processors and whomever else is utilizing these facilities, if they took a more risk-averse approach and distributed that load across different labs, then they would be shielded, at least at some extent, to this sort of thing. But it's my understanding that this lab processed a lot of cannabis.
It's not that they're doing a lot, because
tested a lot,
because there should be free marketplace. It shouldn't be forced. What they should have is a third-party auditor, not the MRA.
But see, the problem with that, and you know, Lev, he touched on it, and it's like this in all industries. Any industry I've come in contact with is like this. These third-party auditors will come in, and you know when they're coming. Like you schedule it months in advance.
No,
there's no
because
no
listen. Here's the thing. They have regulations in place where they don't have to announce when they're coming, and they can show up whenever.
Right,
so the oversight has to be using the existing tools. My thing is the tools exist to do the job.
Tools? To to maybe do like a brute force inspection by the MRA, but that's not what's needed here. When you talk about these auditors, these are people that are experienced in the field.
Well, they're not collecting the data that matters.
No.
And whatever mechanism they're using right now are predictable. It's not spot checking. It's not without deliberation when they're submitting themselves. All of the data that they're providing is manufactured by them instead of it being uncovered. I don't know. I'm saying that there can be, if there needs to be a surprise attack, people have to be put on their.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I'm just saying that it's fairly unprecedented.
Let me say this. I think it's more important that we recognize that there's a motive of the MRA not to have these things happen.
Of course there is.
And I'm going to suggest that it may be gone on for a long time. And the problem is that you don't want the MRA in a dilemma of the shame and blatant error that they claim doesn't happen occurring. It's not in their best interest. So you need to have some other authority that's not directly impacted by that decision to do those things. And that is the same issue that the Michigan State Forensic Science Division has. See the parallel? See the parallel?
I do, but none of us really know what happened here. They released very little information, so I don't know. I mean, maybe there's an explanation that's not, hey, the lab sucks. I mean,
well,
it could
listen.
be.
Let me tell you something else. And I don't think it's a secret. This is also. I think this is a. I always criticize people shouldn't get their education on Instagram, but there's a consensus that the marijuana that's being sold, cannabis being sold at many dispensaries and what it's testing at in terms of THC levels is inflated.
Oh.
And it's inflated by the laboratories.
It's alluded to by the previous guest.
That's not even what we're talking about here. This was not a investigation into THC levels being inflated and getting away with it. It's not that marketplace share that they're getting because they tested at this place and it's 20 and they tested at this place and it's 30. That wasn't even discussed here, okay? But owning 2/3 of the market share isn't just from false positives on microbials. Most of it is garnered from THC, even though that's not really the true measurement. I hear Jamie, even though he's not speaking, but I hear his brain.
Yes.
Everyone knows THC is not the way to. But that's the falsity. If they're doing it, that's what they're selling it by. It's not the entire full plant, right? Did I do it right?
It's close.
But that's the thing that's driving the cost. So I think I think many people know in the industry that lab, in fact, is driving that. And this is not uncommon. Other states have had this happen as well. Anyways, Rob, what do you think about all this? You think this lab thing's a big deal or not? What do you think?
Well, the lab thing, as far as no, we've all the testing we've already had to do. I'm telling you right now, you take one piece of bud and you send it in, you're getting three different tests on that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the truth, and that's why people shop. That's why people go around, because when I'm talking with hemp, it's one thing, but it's some of the same basic things are following through.
Well,
not having that standard operating procedure that's there for each one, not having a established set of DEA type rules or something that dictates what the starting point is, like we talked about earlier. It's a big thing, in my opinion, just because you don't really know. I can send right now to 17 different labs, and I'll tell you right now, they're going to send me 17 different results. Right. Same exact oil.
As long as what Lev was saying earlier is that all the contaminants and the metals and all the kind of stuff like that could cause an issue are have standards and stuff that they can detect and that they readily get to. They're not perfect on the THC percentage or something like that. I mean, what's kind of strange is that doesn't really mean very much, and yet there's a lot of issues being caused over it.
Yeah, it's just because it is so, like they say, like you alluded to earlier, it's a moving target, as they say sometimes.
Jamie, you as a patient or consumer, does this alarm you that they're, the stamp of approval from the MRA that you're buying a healthy, safe product is in fact being recalled now? Does that, from a consumer, does it impact you at all, or does not? Or does it not? Jamie. Cooper.
Me?
Yes. Yeah, please.
Okay. Does it? Ask me the question. Sorry.
I was saying.
Two Jamies.
I know. I'm sorry. Does the
That's okay.
recall of this product, which is something that's not supposed to happen, does it challenge your confidence as a consumer in the retail market? Does it bother you? Are you concerned? Does it make you want to look to a caregiver or something like that? What, or do you not care? We're kind of debating what's the importance of this.
No, as a consumer, no, I'm not bothered, because I've consumed a lot of untested product, and I didn't have any awful harmful effects from that.
Right.
So.
Right. Does it trouble you that you may be buying the product for guarantees that it's not moldy or mildewy or has some other kind of contaminants in it, and you're paying a premium when in fact it's not true? Do you feel ripped off at all?
No.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Do you know if do a lot of the Sensi magazine vendors or, people that are contracted and are licensed, do you know if many of them test with varieties or is that not something you're privy to?
I guess so we did a grab bag promotion for Black Friday, and all the transports have happened with the bags to the stores. Some of the influencers started picking up bags this week. Mm-hmm. And they, none of the products that were in the bags, we had 8 THC products in the bags, and none of them were tested. We got a little lucky on that one, especially since they had so much of the market share. As soon as I heard the news of it, I was like, crap, what's going to happen with the bags?
Right.
And we were in the clear, thankfully.
Right.
I wish others, some of these smaller stores, Kyle Miller on my team, he is a partner in a provisioning center in Ionia, and it's hurting him hard.
Right.
He's a small store,
right.
and I feel bad, and it sucks to see some of those companies going through this amount of pain. It's not fair.
You should call me. There's a lot of lawsuits to be had. Tell him to call me.
Okay.
I'm not kidding. There's a consumer protection yin-yang problem that's like unlimited. Anyways, we got a couple other guests, and it's almost too late to even get to them. And I feel, but let's get on. We got Mike Fisher and Mike from the decriminalize nature, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Mike Fisher and your friend Mike, please announce yourselves and identify your name for the record. Spell your first name and your last name, please. Just kidding.
Well, I'm not with the organization, but Rob and I contributed a bit to an event, a couple weeks ago that went really well and it was a lot of fun. But Mike O'File was one of the organizers, and he can speak a lot more about it.
Welcome, Michael O'File. Please.
So Decrim Nature, we started with Ann Arbor a couple years back and had our big win in September 2020, decriminalizing mushrooms, ayahuasca, mescaline-containing cacti, and iboga. This is something that's gone on in Oakland, California, Santa Cruz, 4 cities across Massachusetts, Seattle, DC did it by ballot initiative. And so since then, this past election day, we won in Detroit with Prop E doing the exact same thing. And we now are moving towards a statewide. Currently, we have Senate Bill 631 introduced by Senators Irwin and Hollier, sitting in the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee. As well as within the next few months, we expect to see Lansing, Ypsilanti, and Hazel Park all move this to their city council for a vote, with about 11 other cities on the court.
Keep going. I don't want to cut you off. It's fascinating. Keep going. Sorry. 11 other cities.
Decrim Nature Michigan, after we won Ann Arbor, we formed as a ballot initiative committee. We started with the legislative approach, but we've always had our eyes on the 2022 ballot if we can't get this done legislatively. And, that timeline's coming up on us quickly to get some language approved and get out there and get our 180 days of signature collecting. So we're rallying all of our resources right now. And
for statewide, there's a statewide ballot you're talking about, right?
Yes,
Okay,
statewide ballot.
And I know, there's a lot of new controversy about that as well. I could tell you from some experience that, they amended the law recently to change a lot of the rules and regulations. One of them being the requirement that the signature include a person's voting district, which is almost like an additional piece of identification, just making it that much harder. It's like, you need 2 pieces of ID to vote kind of thing. It was after the 2018. It's been a lot of litigation. I know the Attorney General wrote an opinion, in fact, declaring all this unconstitutional. It's been kicking around the Court of Appeals, and not all of the language has been resolved. I had a case where our clients and our, we worked together and got approved, and the clerk put it on the ballot, and then someone sued the clerk. I mean, it's crazy. It's a long story, but it's supposed to work. It's supposed to be a easy, user-friendly method of being able to participate in the democratic process. And I don't know that the legislature's has in the past manipulated that. Now, I haven't answered the question, but it seems like the acceptance of plant-based medicine other than cannabis is catching on a lot quicker socially and maybe even medically, maybe even truly medically. And I say that because, I know MDMA may not be in the category, but
it's definitely not in that category.
I know. but the psilocybin.
It is and it isn't.
Well, psilocybin is, and I know that there are double-blind studies, and there's some what do we call it? Michigan is a right to try state. Number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, if they're in phase 2 of the studies of it, which the government has, there's a lot more governmental involvement in research than for cannabis, and if they've made it to stage 2 clinical trials, that's what I'm trying to get to. If it's at that stage in our right to try state, you can use it medically, and in order for that to happen, they've got some clinical trials where they're doing some actual, trials where people
and there's some evidence already that it's therapeutic.
and there's some evidence it's therapeutic. So there's still it's at that phase before they've clarified it one way or the other. But just because it's made it to that stage of possible, Michigan has a right to try. So there's more of a. I mean, it's interesting because there's a completely, completely identified, kind of right to treat yourself medically here, right, with certain limitations. If it's some not legal or prescribed drug is in phase 2, you have a right to engage with that. Cannabis is not there yet, though. Is that crazy?
Yeah, it is.
But much of that.
I mean,
so that's for that. So psilocybin, and you brought up MDMA, and I'm going to include this in this conversation because while our legislation and our ballot initiative are intended towards plant-based entheogens, entheogens would actually include MDMA. Entheogen just means awakening the divine within. It's a better term than psychedelic, mind manifesting. But plant-based entheogens, have been used for thousands of years without any problem, of overdose or, harm to the user. And both MDMA and psilocybin, you're talking about clinical trials, have been granted FDA breakthrough recognition, which means they're being pushed through clinicals at really rapid rates. So yes, if you are terminally ill, you do have a right to try. However, this addresses a lot more than just terminal cases. And it's not entirely just medical. Again, entheogen to awaken the divine within. For myself, I'm a former methamphetamine and heroin addict. I spent many years battling addiction, and one night I couldn't score a bag of dope. And so what did I have? I had some mushrooms, and I'm like, hey, I can get high. I wasn't looking for God. I wasn't looking to cure myself of addiction or treat any ailment. But that one mushroom experience awoke this spiritual experience, helped me look in this cosmic mirror, and all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, what the fuck am I doing with myself? And, it changed my perspective entirely, and it was because of that I was able to move on from my problematic substance use patterns and choose something that not just helped awaken the divine within, but was great for personal betterment of my life, made me clean my room, make my bed, made me do all these things that sound really responsible, made me an activist in my community, working full-time for disability advocates and, doing a lot of different things involved in my community that I just wouldn't have done with any other substance. And they're non-addictive. I maybe use a mushroom experience once every 3 to 5 months. I use cannabis more than that.
Sure. Do you think that everyone?
A lot more than that.
Do you think everyone, whether they are feel like they're suffering in some way or not, which really means they're able to cover it up internally? Do you think everyone should be trying psilocybin? Do you think it's should be mandated? No, I mean not really legally mandated, but do you think people?
So, yeah, I mean, I would love to see all of our elected officials and police officers mandated to try it, but that's another wormhole. Right. But yeah, nothing is panacea. Everybody's brain and body chemistry is very different, sure, and they react differently to different substances. But for the majority of people, the turnaround rate on this for depression, PTSD, anxiety, right on down the line, blows any current accepted treatment out of the water. Johns Hopkins University has the psilocybin research project looking at mushrooms, and they did a study on the spiritual effects of it. They pulled together some rabbis and some priests and some pastors, and, half of them got the placebo, half of them got the real thing. And overwhelmingly, everybody that got the real thing came out of the experience saying, I just had the first legitimate mystical experience of my life.
All right, so I see now we're talking about, so we got a lot of medicinal talk about that and a lot of religious, kind of insight. Do you think I'm talking exclusively about mushrooms or psilocybin, do you think that they are in the realm of recreational use?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, in my own case, I wasn't looking for this spiritual or this medical benefit. I was trying to get high, and I maybe found something better out of it, but I've also taken a low-dose experience at a concert or at a museum. Let me tell you, the Vatican museums on mushrooms, amazing experience. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. Made the colors pop, made me hop into the artist's head and think outside the box. It's a beautiful experience that, yeah, I think it can be used recreationally, but as with any substance, demands respect. You can't just go at it willy-nilly and think you're going to have a good time. We've all heard the term set and setting when talking about psychedelics or entheogens, and, really being in a good place or, surrounding yourself with the environment that's going to be conducive to the experience is really important. If you're around a group of rowdy drunks, fighting and lots of anger, it's not going to be conducive. If you're in a place that's comfortable for you, such as your own home or out in nature or watching the lunar eclipse that's happening tonight, yeah, that's going to be really conducive to a very positive experience for most people.
I want to inject something in here. The idea, and I don't know if this is a discovery, but I'm going to maybe take credit if it catches on anywhere. But in the universe of discussions of the way people use controlled substances, plants, natural, otherwise, I'm going to throw in there that there's a new category. You got your medical, you got your recreational. I'm throwing in there educational. There's an educational use. What do you think? Like you were talking about, like going to a museum, sitting in an art history class, listening to a lecture, right? Watching a documentary of something, right? Am I right about that? That could be a new thing, like kind of enhancing the color, so to speak. I don't know. I don't know if that's a thing. You think it'll catch on, Jimmy?
Absolutely. Helped me learn a lot about myself, but also about my place in the world. But I don't think that's even confined to plant-based medicines. I mean, there's a lot of other substances out there.
Sure, I know.
Useful for studying.
Right.
So, Mike, what was? I know we've discussed this before, and I forgot all the terms, but like, there's different names for levels of dosing, like microdose, and there's
thresholds.
And there's like when you take enough just to feel it a little bit, but you're not really committing to a full trip, and then there's these different levels of, what are some of those?
So traditionally, you got like your microdose, your low dose, and your high dose. I've always felt those don't really encompass the full experience. So a microdose being a subperceptual dose, meaning when you take it, you don't actually have any sort of feeling that it's taking an effect. But a repeated use, a couple times a week, taking this really low 0.1 gram capsule, after a few weeks, you start to notice, wow, I have more energy, I'm more clean, I'm more organized, I'm thinking clearer. Then you have this kind of low, or what I like to call a museum dose, this like 1/4 gram to 1.5 grams, where you can walk around in public and nobody's going to have a clue you are on anything. You're not impaired or anything like that. But maybe, the art seems a little bit more vibrant in the room. The lights are a little more enjoyable at a concert. Then you have, your true low dose sub psychedelic, like 1.5 to 3 grams. That's a very awkward state. You're like right on that threshold where the things that help you face anxiety, face trauma, are being brought to the surface, but not fully emerging from their seed pod. So it's a little edgy. But then you get into that above 3 grams, 3 to 5, that's your basic psychedelic dose. Beyond that, you have what Terrence McKenna coined as heroic, your 3 to 7 or your 5 to 7, and then you got your mega dosers. Detroit's Kalindi EE was a big proponent of mega dosing and like really awakening what he called ancient technology that is mushroom consciousness. And personally, I find some of my most beneficial experiences to be that above 7 gram level. But again, when you're taking them like that, you take them once every 3 to 5, maybe 6 months, and it lasts. Like the experience didn't last. The experience is 6 hours, but the effects, the way it made you think about the world, you get to integrate that into your life and make better life choices for yourself.
Wow.
Sure.
Is there such a thing? Is there any stories out there that there's too much psilocybin that one's taken and not had a good experience and not returned as they wanted to, or worse off?
So specifically interactions with like schizophrenia are a concern. If schizophrenia is existing in your genetics, psychedelics may not be for you. Those are those cases you hear where like somebody didn't come back. Is there such a thing as this perma trip that, you know, has been talked about for years as a scare tactic, or, you know, flashbacks? No, there's no medical scientific evidence to back that. However, if, you know, there isn't some latent schizophrenia involved, I mean, I know for myself, I've taken up to 32 grams. Kalindi EE that I just mentioned, he talked about taking a 60 gram dose. There's no established LD50 to my knowledge, LD50 being lethal dosage for psilocybin.
Right. Well, you know, they don't, you know, right. And there's no correlation, or there's no cause. There's always, you know, assertions of correlation. They've said this about cannabis too. There's some, I'm not agreeing with it. There's been suggestions that certain age groups, you know, they may be predisposed at some point to some mental health issues that, you know, some of the controlled substances, you know, are, you know, increased, you know, accelerators, so to speak. I don't know, but I'm not certain about it. But I certainly understand the caveat that you propose, which is that some predisposed for mental health issues may be wary of its use and whatever. And this isn't, you know, we're talking about an issue here. We're not, you know, we're not necessarily making an advertisement. But, you know, I'm curious to see.
Mike,
yes.
I'm sorry, Mike O'File. Do you think there's a ceiling when you say 60 gram dose? Like there might not be an LD50, but from a 10 gram to a 60 gram dose, do you think it's just the longevity of the experience that gets greater, or do you think there are like, okay?
Yes, there's definitely a ceiling to how far you go. That is more this idea of ego death, this merging with everything. But once you break the like 14 to 21, somewhere in that range, you're really just expanding the length of the experience. But if you are at a true ego death state, you have no perception of time because there is no you to perceive said time. You've remembered this ancient technology, this vast consciousness that Kalindi spoke of.
The pattern that everything seems to follow, and the feeling of oneness with everything, that so many belief systems and people who've had different experiences like this have, you know, shared.
Absolutely. And, you know, when we are talking about mental health, most mental health conditions, you know, I mentioned PTSD, depression, anxiety. Most can be effectively treated by this. Some Johns Hopkins and Imperial College London, UC Boulder studies are, showing like 90% efficacy rates on these substances for treating these. And, in terms of age groups, Michael Pollan, tremendous author, but he rediscovered LSD and then the mushroom experience in his 60s after not having done it in 20, 30 years. And we're seeing a lot of the older generations coming to our movement after having read his book and really, feeling like, wow, I've wasted my entire life, but that doesn't mean that it's all wasted. I'm awake now and I can do something. And, to see a 70-year-old have the, energy and vigor of a 20-year-old and be excited about life after, feeling like they've been trapped for 50 years is just incredible.
Oh, yeah. No, it 100% is. I'm kind of injecting in because I, about 6-8 months ago started, quarter grams is what I started on. And, I make these little capsules I take, every so often. I don't really do it that often anymore. But yeah, no, medically wise, it's probably changed my life more even as cannabis has with my neuropathy, something I never expected because I was using it to try to treat other things. And the next thing I know that my overall body neuropathy, which is my major issue, is easily 60 to 70% lighter.
Nice.
Well, these substances, they cause neurogenesis, the formation of new neurons and neural pathways. Yep. They are neuroregenerative. So old fried connections start waking up and you start remembering things you may have forgotten, maybe because of Alzheimer's. And then they improve neuroplasticity. So already existing pathways are strengthened by this. These are good for your brain. The research is really out on that. And I mean, that goes beyond the naturally occurring ones, but the reason we are focused on naturally occurring entheogens with decrim nature is because of the ancestral practice and thousands of years of use. Plus, just like cannabis, everybody deserves to be able to grow these things at home. They're safe, they don't have an overdose, and quite frankly, if we just allow this medical model to come in and with the FDA approval as these clinicals finish, what's going to happen is we're going to have an accessibility issue. Those with the most privilege are going to have the most access, and those that are dealing with the most trauma and suffering in their life are going to have no access. And so we really are trying to protect the right to cultivate at home and practice how you want.
It's interesting because the same evolution is inevitable for the next what we're talking about, the plants, what do we call them? Entheogens. And you're right about the growing at home because if they become FDA approved, you're not going to go to a pharmacy and getting mushrooms. You're going to be getting some synthesized or some liquid that they can control or whatever. And some pharmaceutical grade of it. Because the same thing with cannabis. The pharmaceutical industry is never going to say a bag of marijuana. This is never going to, it's just not going to do that. But it always begs the question, like some of these other, there's like what Oregon legalized everything, right? Then they just fucking they threw it all in there.
Well, decrim. Measure 110.
Right. Okay.
In Oregon, decriminalized all substances. But if you actually look at it, it didn't really do that much. It allows you 12.4 grams of mushrooms. That's not a single full experience for me, and certainly not enough to share with friends as I like to do.
Of course. I was just saying, though, it begs the question. It begs the question of. When you do these in these various states, where you have free drug, or treatment zones where compassion zones or facilities where people can come and, be a drug user maybe even get it as an idea that for treatment or whatever, create an assistant that it's always the sourcing, right? Where's it going to come from? Are we going to have like mom and pa's growing mushrooms and selling them retail? Are we going to have, and where's this going to go? And always the concern of, I'm saying, but this is the same debate that's going on right now. The whole, $1.65 million in cannabis sales in the market last year, and then, $200 million worth of product turns out to be falsely tested. I mean, this is the world of tax and regulate. It works for, you put tax and regulate in any of these newly developing markets. It's, you got to be careful what it turns into. You know what I mean? Tax and regulate could be, for many, the new prohibition for cannabis. And it kind of is going there for those not at the table who have the capital get a license, And I think you're bringing up a good point as the reality sets in as to the medicinal and, just general value of these plants, there would be a cash grab. There'll be angling for dominance and, licensing and prohibition with that. The licensing and regulations goes with others not having. I mean, like, for example, if they, if they unschedule marijuana to Schedule 2 or Schedule 3, for example, I think it's going to be hard for the adult markets to compete because now pharmaceutical companies are going to own the patents and the licenses. And they're much more powerful than the police. Like, they have islands. They'll take an island, drop you off there. If you're making, their drugs in your basement and you're competing with their licenses, the pharmaceutical licenses, For example, if they find out you're making Viagra in your basement, someone's going to be pissed off, the pharmaceutical company, like, that's going to, so whatever. So that's it. That's what I think that the problem is there. And I don't know what the answer is. I think we're a long way from being approved of it, and yet still sourcing it is going to be a problem as well. But I want to have you back on. I think I was going to say, I think everyone's had it. The people are giving me the wrap it up sign because we're way past our time. Will you promise to come back? Can we talk about this some more? I think it's a fascinating topic. I want to ask you more about McKinnon and some of the things you're talking about, and maybe we'll talk it out a little bit more. Will you promise to do that?
Yeah, be glad to.
Michael will help hook that up. Mike Fisher over there. Mike, thanks for bringing our friend on tonight. It was very informative and curious to hear more about it.
Yeah, I'd love to come back and talk more about it, actually, honestly.
Excellent.
It's all something I think we, us three have kind of come a little bit together on some stuff here. So
that's awesome. Awesome. Maybe they'll have those.
I do want to say we've had a lot of learning opportunities with cannabis, and we're still learning, as we've clearly been talking about all night tonight. And these are experiences that we need to consider very heavily, as you pointed out, as we move forward with how we do this.
Although I am kind of interested in a psilocybin event organizer license. I think that sounds interesting, doesn't it? Like a mushroom jam instead of a canna jam. I don't know. I'm playing now. I'm just playing.
Well, we just did Entheo Fest in Ann Arbor with MLive said over 1,000 people. So right where Hash Bash is, and it's going to go on every September from here till infinity.
Is that an open public consumption of fungus?
We advised against it. That's not to say that there wasn't clearly something going on.
Sure.
I know several people that were consuming, but we did have, while there was no arrest, no big instances, there was definitely one guy that was tripping his nuts off, throwing cigarettes and lighters at the drone that was filming us.
Sure.
Somebody having way too much fun. But we're working to try and make it not so much a public consumption event and have the consumption spaces go on later in the day at a party spot.
Sure. Yeah, that would be.
People are making a spur of the moment decision to take it for their first time without the proper guidance and in a good, comfortable place.
Yeah, and I would imagine that it may even be advisable not to consider that a safe place and setting, right? Like that's not like a huge crowd.
It's a political rally,
Right.
just like Hash Bash traditionally is.
Right.
We got people heated up about, beyond entheogens, the war on drugs is a failure. Like,
Yes.
people
no
are
argument
upset.
here. Yes, pissed off.
Yeah, so
But the political.
I'd love to come back and talk about this.
Yes. I do have to say, when you talk about the politics and that level of stuff, I'm reminded of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, like the Bill Murray version of it. I don't know if you saw that one, but, the whole. But that's,
With
it's.
the Buffalo Road.
Right, yeah.
Man, I loved Entheo Fest. It came together, and
That
so
was
it was its
great.
first time, man. So it did its own thing. I mean, it was kind of guided after the Hash Bash type of an experience, and at the same location and stuff like that. But it was its own thing, and it was the first one, so there was not much precedent, aside from the paralleling the Hash Bash stuff. So I really had a great time.
And we couldn't have done that. We couldn't have done that without Student Association for Psychedelic Studies and SSDP. I know SSDP has always been a big partner to get Hash Bash there. But yeah, those student groups and supported the university for those groups to let these things happen. We really gotta be grateful for that.
Well, we got to get you back on. First of all, thanks for everyone. Rob, Mike, Amanda, thank you. And Jamie, appreciate you showing up. We can expect you back every week now from now on.
I don't know about that.
Oh, come on.
This was reasonable tonight. This didn't completely turn me off.
I appreciate that. And I know your threshold for turnoff is very, very low. But, all right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Then we're going to call it a wrap for episode 540. I thank PSI Lab for earlier and Jamie Cooper, of course. And everyone be safe, and hopefully we'll talk at you next week. We're calling it. That's it. Shut it down.
All right.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
When you're charged with a crime, you need a real attorney. And here's just a few reasons why. The police, the courts, the labs, the drug tests, probation, the judges, the jails, the prisons, and the entire system is just one big machine. They have one objective. Take your freedom, take your possessions, take your money, take your children, control your life, and destroy your future. You only get one chance to hire the right attorney. One that will stay in your corner. One that will fight for your rights. One that will fight for your freedom. Choose an attorney that's experienced in fighting the justice machine. Attorney Michael Komorn. Knockout victories one case at a time. Komorn Law. Google it. komornlaw.com.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
Hi, I'm attorney Michael Komorn of Komorn Law PLC, and you are watching Planet Green Trees.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today, michiganmedicalmarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. michiganmedicalmarijuana.org.
Before you plead, call me attorney Michael Komorn.
An important and historical farm crop in American agriculture is returned after having been classified as a controlled substance and illegal. On December 20th, 2018, the President signed the Farm Bill, also known as the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018, into law. The signing of the act was great news for the hemp industry, which amended the definition of marijuana in the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Hemp is now defined as the plant, Cannabis sativa L, and any part of the plant, growing or not, with less than 0.3% THC concentration on a dry basis. The plant itself is no longer a controlled substance. Hemp is one of the most versatile plants on earth. From clothing, fiber, paper, building materials, hempcrete, biofuels, CBD, and medical uses, it has been a part of America's industry for over 200 years. Even the United States Constitution was drafted on hemp paper. The time is now. If you're thinking of getting in the farming or processing of hemp, contact our global experts, legal, and consultation teams to make sure that you're on the right road when you venture into the new hemp industrial revolution. Michigan Hemp Industries has been a leader and advocate for the return of the hemp industry, so come be a part of the new revolution in agriculture in Michigan.
I am Earl from G3 Cannabis Therapy Network,